America right now.
I'm Alex Michelson, live in Los Angeles. Welcome to a very special edition of The Story Is. Election night in America. 6 states holding primaries, including New Jersey, South Dakota, Iowa. Some of the biggest races are happening right now, right here in California. Vote counting is underway with the governor and mayor's races in the spotlight. The latest projections show a crowded ballot in the governor's race, narrowing to just a few candidates at the head of the pack. You see right there, Republican Steve Hilton is in the lead, closely followed by Democrat Xavier Becerra. Tom Steyer, the billionaire businessman, hoping to get into that top 2 spot, the top 2 advance. But right now, Hilton and Becerra are looking really good to advance. A lot to celebrate at the headquarters of the Becerra campaign. Arlette Saenz is there, and I know we expect Becerra to speak sometime soon, right?
Yeah, right now the crowd here at Xavier Becerra's campaign event is in a waiting game, waiting for results and also waiting for their chosen candidate to speak. We're hoping that this might take place at some point in the coming hour, but right now the Becerra campaign is certainly seeing some encouraging signs in the latest results that show both Becerra and Hilton at the top of the pack in this very crowded governor's race. Hilton, I know, spoke with you a bit earlier tonight as well, saying that he was also encouraged by what he was seeing. But one thing here in California is that the state typically is very slow to count their votes. Part of the reason due to the size, part of the reason because of the universal mail-in ballot, with voters being able to postmark their ballots as late as today. And so that will contribute to some of the uncertainty of these results as the campaigns are fully waiting to see what happens. A bit earlier, we heard from progressive Tom Steyer, who told his supporters that now is a time to be patient, but he's still holding out some hope that he will be able to emerge into that top 2. But we will see how this all unfolds in the coming hours. For Xavier Becerra, he is speaking eventually here in downtown LA. This is an area that he used to represent when he was a member of Congress. So there are many people who have known Becerra for quite some time at this event, and they are hoping that after tonight he will be in that top 2 finishing to head to that matchup come November.
Arlette, thank you. We will get back to you soon. Votes are coming in right now in the LA mayor's race. Let's take a look at the latest numbers there. The mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass, the incumbent, looking good in terms of advancing. She's at 36.6%. There's a battle for second place, and right now it certainly looks good for Spencer Pratt, the challenger, former reality show star, now community advocate. Looks at the moment very strong for being in a runoff with Karen Bass. Nithya Raman, the city council member, in 3rd place right now. CNN's Kyung Law is outside the watch party for LA mayoral candidate Spencer Pratt. Usually something like this, Kyung, there'd be a big event where the media is invited in, there's a big speech, but Spencer Pratt hasn't done anything the usual way since he started his race, and that includes tonight.
And, you know, I think that's part of his appeal, and that's really what's interesting to watch, even though I'm standing on a sidewalk when we should be actually seeing the candidate and talking to supporters. This is different, and I think different is really what has sort of propelled this campaign. So if you haven't been watching what's been happening tonight, this black curtain that you're seeing here is erected in front of a Mexican restaurant here on the west side of Los Angeles. There are some unconventional supporters who are popping up. The press is standing here on the sidewalk. You can see some of the people who did not get an invite to the private party just standing out here. The thing that I can tell you is that we personally haven't seen him. We don't know if he's going to be coming out here. There is no campaign contact person for us to talk to. We did hear at that first drop a big cheer coming from the other side of the black curtain. They've been playing music throughout the evening. We haven't heard any speeches, but that cheer after that first drop, certainly signaling at least some encouragement. They're charged up after seeing some of those results come in for him. But as far as anything else, there was a celebrity, Billy Bush, come out to make a brief statement, but then went inside. But really, we haven't heard any of the big supporters come out and talk yet. It's really hard to tell, Alex, too, if Spencer Pratt's going to come out and chat, because I'm on this side of the curtain. Alex?
Kyung Law, thank you for that. We are standing by to head to Huntington Beach. We are awaiting Steve Hilton to speak momentarily. It is looking good for him as we bring in CNN's chief data analyst Harry Enton live at the Magic Wall. Harry, you're looking at the governor's race. It's all about the top two, and it seems like, the top two that a lot of people were predicting may end up as the top two.
It is what we thought it was, Alex Michelson. It is what we thought it was. This is what the late pre-election polling suggested. It was what the prediction market suggested. It is what I went on the air on Monday and suggested what was likely going to happen. And you can see it right here. Look, you got Steve Hilton, Javier Becerra, 1 and 2, and then you got Tom Steyer all the way back at 20%. Now, I will note there's this key nugget, right? We have about 49% of the estimated vote remaining. But so far, the votes that are in are quite good for both Hilton and Becerra. And you can just see it on the map right here. Look at this. In this light red, look at all of the Steve Hilton. A lot of light red. And then the light blue, Javier Becerra. Look at this. I think one of the key things that we were kind of looking at here or thinking was, this is the home area right around the San Francisco Bay Area of Tom Steyer, who's in dark blue. But who's in light blue all around the San Francisco Bay Area? It is, in fact, Javier Becerra who is leading in that area. And I will note, more than that, even if you zoom in, right, the only dark blue I can really find in the San Francisco Bay Area is, in fact, San Francisco County. But even here, look at this. Tom Steyer, he's ahead, but he's only at 32%. The rest of the San Francisco Bay Area is all light blue. And then, of course, Javier Becerra is from down here in the Los Angeles area, right? And what do we see? We see Javier Becerra 1, but it's not Tom Steyer in very blue Los Angeles, right? A county that went overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris. In fact, Tom Steyer is actually running slightly a bit in third place at this point. Now, the other thing I will note, of course, was there's this whole idea, right? Oh, is there potential that the Democrats might get locked out of the top two? That was one of those fears. But look at where the other Republican is. Look at where Chad Bianco is. He's all the way back at 11% right now. So right now what we're really talking about is a top two between Hilton and Becerra. And I guess the real question, which is yet unknown at this hour, is with this 49% of the vote in, I'm going to underline it right here, when we get that additional 51% of the vote, will, in fact, Tom Steyer be able to close? I was looking at the pre-election polling. It did not, in fact, suggest it would be good enough for Steyer to actually close it. But we'll see.
And we have seen some momentum for Steyer in the last few days. We're just going to see how much momentum. Thank you to Harry Enton. Let's go to Huntington Beach. This is where Steve Hilton started his campaign. He's back in the same exact spot to now talk tonight. Let's listen in.
Who was governor of California not that long ago. Not that long ago. And I remember when I became an American citizen, that certain governor you may remember. He said, congratulations. He made a very nice video. He said, but Steve, you got to get the wrong jacket. You got the wrong jacket. And I made a pledge that day that one day I would get the jacket that Arnold told me to get on my road to being governor of California. And here it is. I am a proud American. There's the jacket. And I am a very proud Californian. A very proud Californian tonight. Arnold, that was for you. Yes, exactly. So, you didn't see it. All right. Look. And California. So I've been traveling this state for the last year. We started off a scrappy little startup, just a handful of rebels, believing that this state could be better than it is today. We're already the best place in the world, no question about that. There's nowhere better than California. But we all know that this state has gone off track and we need to get it back on track. And I've seen the struggle that Californians are facing today. That is the word, and it's a very sad thing to say about our beautiful state. And I've been on the road and doing hundreds of events and the town halls and all the people that come, and I see it in your eyes, the struggle of running a small business, the struggle for working people in California. Young people who don't see their future in California anymore, who think that they have to move to another state to have that dream of owning their own home that we used to offer better than anywhere else in the world. That's what we need to get back for California. The belief that we can offer that. And so to every young person watching in California, whether you voted for me or not tonight, I just want you to know that I see you. I believe in you. I know that you can do it. I know that we can do it. We can make California a place where when you work hard, it's not just a struggle. That's why my plan is so simple and practical, not ideological. We've had enough ideology in California, haven't we? It's time. It's time for positive, practical things. I'm fighting for working people in California so that you can keep more of what you earn. The best way to put money in people's pockets is to take less out of it in the first place. And that's what I'll do as your governor. Your first 100 grand tax-free. Simple, practical things to make life less of a struggle for working people and for small businesses. Most of my career has been in business. I've run small businesses, including restaurants. That is a tough business, by the way. And here's how we're going to help small business in California. Number one, simple, practical things. $800 every business has to pay to the government just for existing. That's crazy. We're going to get rid of that. We're going to help small business. Working people in California paying the highest gas prices in the country. That's insane when we have abundant oil reserves right here in California. As long as we are using oil and gas in California, let's use California oil and gas. That's the plan. And that way, we can get our gas prices down. $3 gas. That's the plan. Electric bills, the highest in the
We've been listening in to Steve Hilton at his rally in Huntington Beach. We want to bring in our panel now. Joining me in studio is the former U.S. Senator from California, Barbara Boxer, the former Lieutenant Governor of California, Abel Maldonado, and Paul Mitchell, the Vice President of Politica and owner of Redistricting Partners. Abel, let's start with you. You were Lieutenant Governor to Arnold Schwarzenegger, who he just referenced there. The real jacket Arnold Schwarzenegger wore, the one that said governor on it, which he hasn't quite gotten yet. What do you make of Steve Hilton's performance and his messaging in trying to convince an electorate now that is not just Republican?
I think he had a pretty good night tonight, to be very sincere. He's leading at the top, and look, his message was simple, Alex, and good. Just a couple of three things, and now he's going to have to figure out what the next step is going to be because the registration is so lopsided toward the Democrat Party. How is he going to reach independents, decline the states? And in order for Steve Hilton to become governor, he needs to have Democrats that are going to vote for him. So right now, it's going to be thread on the needle in the next couple of months, and then we're going to know a lot more Xavier Becerra. I mean, look, Javier came out of nowhere. 6 weeks ago, he was at 4%. And organically, look where he's at. I mean, Swalwell drops out. He goes up. Yeah. Decline to states. Independents go to him. Yeah. And he's going to be their nominee. It's great.
I mean, we will see. Tom Steyer has not conceded that point yet, but the numbers so far are good for Xavier Becerra. To that point, you know, ABC7 was going to do a debate at USC, and Xavier Becerra did not even make the stage because his poll numbers were so low. There was an uproar over that, and then they end up canceling that debate. He ends up now making stages after Eric Swalwell drops out. but an extraordinary comeback, if you think about it, in terms of a political race, if Javier Becerra, who was outspent by Tom Steyer almost 200 million to 1, and still beat him.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if he beat him, but it certainly looks that way.
Yeah. Well, let me just say to my good friend about Hilton. The thing about Hilton is he's endorsed by Trump. And, you know, we can't forget about it. The fact that we're having this election at the same time that there's a congressional election to get a check and balance on Trump. So with all due respect to my friend, and every time I hear Hilton, he's so good, fun to listen to. I love the accent. But I think I'm in the British Parliament, and I'm thinking the guy's so rough on immigrants, and here he is, you know. So I don't really see it. And if you look at the numbers, and our numbers man here, the best in the world here, could tell us this, but if you just look, if Javier just gets the other votes from the other Democrats, and if Hilton gets the votes from the one Republican, it's 60-40. So I think we're looking good on the governor's race.
The numbers guy she's talking about is Paul Mitchell. How do you read the numbers and sort of what Tom Steyer would need to do now in order to get into the top 2?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly how many ballots are still to be counted. But if we take this CNN number that about 50% of ballots have been counted, and if Steyer is 6 points behind, that means that in the remaining ballots, he needs to be winning those remaining ballots by 12 points, which is an 18-point shift from where we are right now. So it does seem like an incredibly high hill to beat. Now, the other question is, are those late ballots incredibly Democratic? We know Democrats were holding their ballots. There was this ballot clutching by Democrats waiting for somebody to tell them what the right person to vote for was. If the late ballots are more and more and more Democratic, you could start to see Steyer catching up to Hilton and Hilton coming down. The challenge is, and the thing that I was looking for immediately, is what's the gap between Bianco and Hilton?
Mm-hmm.
That
well, let's
massive
look at
gap.
it. Let's look at it right now.
15-point gap.
Yeah, a 15-point, which tells you what?
It tells me there was consolidation on the Republican side, and that 15-point gap will likely carry through to all the counting. And so what that means is that by the end of the day, I would guess that you're going to have Hilton at 25 and Bianco at 10 when all of it's said and done. And it's hard to see Hilton coming down and Tom Steyer being able to pass him or Becerra.
Hard for him get to 26%. Thank you all. We appreciate it. We'll be continuing to talk to you throughout the night. We're going to sneak in a quick break. We'll have more of CNN's special coverage of election night in America. We expect to hear from Javier Becerra very soon.
And Fox. We can do debates every Friday if she would like, because it's actually became my most favorite thing to do. So yes, as many debates as Mayor Bass would like.
What would you tell her now that it's on between the two of you?
Oh, I mean, she knows it's on. She's. I hope she's ready, you know, because I literally could not be more excited.
This is a campaign that started because you lost your home in the Palisades fire, because your parents lost their home in the Palisades fire. But you have said it's evolved. Now you're concerned with public safety and rebuilding. Is that the platform that you're going to start with right now in these next 5 months?
Again, I got in this because as a citizen, I felt like my city failed myself, my neighbors, my family. And when I got on this mission now, I look around and the city's failing most of Los Angeles. And now I'm in all these communities and I'm hearing everyone's issues and problems. Excuse me, sir. Yeah, thank you. People are all across the city
You're talking about homelessness, you're talking about drugs, you're talking about crime, you're talking about the lack of police, fire department.
The list of failures across the city. There's people that just want the potholes fixed. Mayor Bass has allowed the city to be covered in potholes. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have lights. So on the basic level, there's people that care about that. Then there's the moms who want to be able to go to the parks and not see anybody shooting up fentanyl with their pants off. I was in the Valley yesterday, a beautiful Persian restaurant, and the lovely owner said, Spencer, they have naked drug addicts in front of the kids when we're trying to have food at the restaurant. This is across the city. And again, as mayor, I'm going to help these homeless people, these drug addicts. Right now, this idea that it's just, we need more beds, I agree. We do need beds in treatment facilities, mandatory treatment. That's not jail. Criminals deserve to go to jail. If you're abusing animals, you're going to jail. If you are doing crimes, you go to jail. But if you're just an addict addicted to super meth or fentanyl, well, I'm going to get you the mandatory help that these moms come up to me and say, my daughter is not homeless. She has a family, but she needs to get off of meth.
What is this final moment for everybody, for the voters of Los Angeles, for those who've been the voice of the angry and the frustrated here in LA? We know you got to go, but what
I don't have to go. I'm just, you know,
We're just closing in on you.
I almost think we just invite you guys all into the back of my facility here. Yeah.
Do you see an uphill battle in the next 5 months?
Absolutely not. I think the next 5 months is I'm going to have time to build out this team to show everybody the level of Democratic supporters that I have behind me, the heavy hitters that are in this room that are all behind me. And I think this idea that I don't represent Democrats and Republicans and independents, anyone that's just a Los Angeles citizen that wants basic quality of life, I'll be able to show that in 5 months. Right now, the media likes to say, oh, he's this. I'm not that. I'm an Angelino who said enough is enough, and I had to step up. I didn't know I'd be here tonight, but this is obviously God's plan, and I'm going to go all the way, and I'm going to show everybody that I'm their mayor. I'm not going to, yes, sir.
What does this moment mean to you personally? You know, you got into this on the year after the fires.
So that's Spencer Pratt, and our thanks to the photographer who's doing as good a job as they can on a crowded street, trying to get Spencer Pratt in this impromptu press gaggle that we are looking at as well on a night where he's putting up a pretty good number. He had told me that he was going to get to 50% and win this thing outright. That's what he told me yesterday. It certainly doesn't look like that, but it is looking increasingly likely that he is going to be in the top two, meaning a runoff between him and Karen Bass in the fall. And by the way, speaking of debates, we'd love to host one here on CNN if the mayor and Spencer Pratt want to join us. Joining me now from New York is Democratic strategist and former Gavin Newsom campaign manager Addisu Demissi, who is one of the smartest and most successful political strategists in California. You actually know what it's like to win elections in California. Since we're on the mayor's race, let's go there first. And you just listen to Spencer Pratt. Your thoughts about him, about Karen Bass, about what the Pratt number, which clearly is not just Republicans, says about where voters are at.
I think he's obviously channeling a certain level of frustration that Angelinos have, that Angelino voters have with the state of the city. I also think he's getting a little ahead of himself. Paul was talking about this, I think, on the last segment. There are a lot more votes left to come, and those votes are going to be increasingly base Democratic votes that may go, I would actually guess they will go more towards Bass and relative to the votes that are already in, towards Bass and Rahman as opposed to him. So there is actually still a chance, I think, that he's going to end up in third. But assuming he does end up in the general election, I do think he's channeling something for real. I also think he's a Republican in a Democratic state running in a Democratic year come November, if that's the case, and it's going to be an uphill battle against the sitting mayor once she consolidates the Democratic Party.
And of course, as he points out, it's a nonpartisan election, so it does not say Republican or Democrat on the ballot. But I'm sure Karen Bass and her friends in the Democratic Party will spend a whole lot of money to remind people of that fact, as they did against Rick Caruso, who had changed parties and was a former Republican, and they spent a lot of money and did that, and it helped her to win the last time around. Let's talk about the governor's race. You know what it's like to win a governor's race in California. You won the last one with Gavin Newsom. Yeah. You also have sort of as good of an understanding of the numbers that we don't see, the numbers behind the numbers. How are you reading the results right now? And in terms of how likely is it that we end up with Becerra and Hilton and not Steyer in that top two?
I think it's very likely at this point that that's where we end up. I think it is irresponsible to call it because, more than half the vote is likely out there, and those votes deserve to be counted. But I think, probably we're talking about tomorrow's vote dumps. I think most people watching this probably know what usually happens the day after Election Day is counties will count all day, and then sometime around 4 or 5 o'clock Pacific time will sort of drop a big dump of that count, and that will continue over the course of the rest of this week. Those votes that get counted over the course of the next 24 hours, I think will tell us basically everything we need to know, because Tom Steyer needs to win those votes and win them big to close the gap between him and second place. And it's possible. I do think there's a theory that he had some momentum here at the end and that people strategically voted. But the gap is pretty big at 6 points right now. And I think it's going to be hard. He needs to win them and win them big. So I think the race probably ends up getting called tomorrow at about 5 o'clock when we see LA County, San Francisco County, Alameda, Santa Clara, the big counties dump. And we see if Steyer doesn't have enough momentum at that point, enough closing of the gap, it's going to be over by then.
And in a sentence or two, how did Becerra pull this off? Why do you think it's him?
It's a really good question. I think really there were a couple seismic moments in the race. Obviously, the biggest one that affected Becerra was Swalwell getting out of the race, but we also had relatively at the same point Hilton being endorsed by Trump. And I think at that point, those two things happening in such close proximity led voters to finally tune into the race. And I think ultimately the voters were largely, I don't want to say uninspired, but underwhelmed by their choices. And they saw somebody they knew, they'd heard of. He had high favorabilities, he had high name recognition, and essentially settled on him as an acceptable option amongst the options remaining post Swalwell. And so, he's going to win with not a majority of Democrats even voting for him, but enough Democrats consolidating behind him to win.
Addisu Demisi, who has been one of the most successful strategists in California, joining us tonight from New York. Thanks for staying up late with us as we all watch these numbers come in. Always great to see you.
Good to see you too, man.
We've got some breaking news here at CNN. CNN is now projecting that Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor of Los Angeles, will advance to a runoff. And so she's going to make the top two. The question is, who is she going to be running against? But we know that Karen Bass has punched one of the two tickets to a runoff. She's not going to get 50%, which means that there will be a runoff. As you just saw, Javier Becerra has just stepped to the mic. Let's listen in to him as he speaks here in Los Angeles.
Have spoken loudly and proudly. And while I take nothing for granted, there are lots of ballots left to be counted. It appears that we are on track to advance to November. One step closer to the son of those hard-working immigrants, Maria and Manuel Becerra, becoming the next governor of the great state of California. Now that's more than a Hollywood ending. More than a milestone. It's the everyday miracle of living in a state that regularly makes the improbable seem inevitable. And I couldn't have done it without you. The doctors who clocked double shifts but still found time to canvass. The teachers who became our best volunteers the minute the afternoon school bell rang. The small business owners and union members who kept our economy running by day while walking door to door at night. The firefighters, the janitors, the caregivers, the nurses and longshoremen, the students. Most of all, I wouldn't be here without Carolina, Clarissa, Olivia, and Natalia. You are my superpower. You are my secret sauce. Everything I do for families just like ours who deserve their shot at the California dream. You know, I ran for the job because I know how important California is as a shining light to the world, radiating hope, freedom, opportunity, an unwavering belief in science, public schooling, enterprise, and foundational justice and human rights. California is America on fast forward. It's gleaming spotlights on the better angels of a more perfect union. A preview of an America, not just for the privileged or the partisans, but for all the people, by the people. An economic engine so powerful, so diverse, with more jobs, more capital, more R&D, more GDP. We lift up the entire nation. We are America's center tent pole. But I also know there are powerful forces aligned to darken our light. Distrust, disinformation, division, and distraction. Make no mistake, those forces did not want tonight to happen because their success depends on our failure. The last thing these forces want is a working class governor with a law degree and a union card ready to call them out. They know that I can't be bought. They know I can't be bullied. And they know I will not back down. Now, we also recognize that despite all of California's growth and innovation, wealth and workforce, there are still too many Californians who feel shut out, priced out of the winner's circle. They feel disconnected from the economy, from our government, from the job market, the housing market, and from one another. In this new world, it feels like the old guarantees no longer apply, and the promise of a brighter future is an artifact of the past. For all of California's greatness, we sometimes struggle to meet the standards we set for ourselves, or to be the example that a divided nation or the next generation of dreamers so desperately need us to be.
We've been listening to Xavier Becerra.
As your governor, I am ready to lead the fight to uphold California's promise.
As he's speaking in Los Angeles, a very good night for Xavier Becerra so far. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten looking at how good a night with the numbers at the Magic Wall. Harry.
You know, he was wearing a Columbia blue collared shirt. We have him in Columbia blue on our board here, and you could see there. I can crack jokes at 1:35 here in the East, 10:35 out there in the West.
Prime time, baby, out here.
Yeah, there we go. Beautiful, beautiful. And prime time in the West. I know it's prime time somewhere. We got Xavier Becerra right here at 26% of the vote. As we've talked about, right, it's the top two who advanced. Becerra's hoping to advance. We got Steve Hilton here at 26.9%. The name of the game as we go forward now is we have now 50% of the vote. Last time we spoke, we had 49% of the vote, is whether or not Tom Steyer in your navy blue can catch either Becerra or Hilton. And I will note at this particular point, what you're seeing here is a lot of Xavier Becerra, Columbia blue, in areas that we might have expected Tom Steyer to do well in, specifically around his home in the San Francisco Bay Area. You can see it right here. There is only one county that is, in fact, navy blue for Tom Steyer. The rest of it is all Columbia blue for Xavier Becerra, and that's San Francisco itself. And even there, we see Tom Steyer only up 32% to 25%. But at this point, I think the key nuggets to take away here is Steve Hilton and Xavier Becerra lead, but who's the next closest Republican? It's Chad Bianco at just 11%. So the name and question of the game here going forward, as we wait and count the final 50% of the vote, is whether Steyer can count Becerra and then we get a Democrat and a Republican, or whether Steyer actually catches Hilton. And some of the late pre-election polling, in fact, suggested that when we get the later vote in, there were a lot of Democrats waiting to hold on to their ballots. As those votes come in, my guess is Becerra stays pretty gosh darn good in this thing, but maybe we see Hilton start to fall, Steyer start to rise. But at this point, what we're looking at is we just see a lot of that Columbia blue, including down here, because Xavier Becerra from the Los Angeles area, up over Tom Steyer. But now what we've seen, even when the last time we counted it, we actually had Steyer and Hilton flip. So we've seen Steyer gain a little bit. Can Steyer continue to gain, my dear friend Alex Michelson? Because that is ultimately what's going to happen here. And as your last guest and you were talking about, we'll get a lot more information as the day goes on, and we'll continue to get some vote counts here. But at this point, it's Hilton 1, Becerra 2, Becerra coming out. And that, to me, seeing what he says, I agree with the gentleman.
Harry Enten, thank you for that. We'll check back in with you in a moment. We've got another great panel standing by as well. We got to pay some bills, though. We're going to sneak in a quick break. We'll be right back with more of Election Night in America. It's election night in America and in Los Angeles, where right now CNN projects that Karen Bass will advance to a runoff. It's unclear who she will advance to that runoff against, either Spencer Pratt or Nithya Raman. Right now, Pratt is in second place. And in the governor's race, we have not projected that anybody will advance. But Steve Hilton, Javier Becerra are looking good right now. Tom Steyer trailing in third place. The top two advance regardless of party. This is such a big night that we've got two political panels with us. Now we're bringing in Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst and opinion columnist for Bloomberg, Alicia Krause, conservative commentator and op-ed writer for the Washington Examiner, and Peter Hamby, founding partner at Puck News and also a host at Snapchat for Good Luck America. Good luck to everybody that's counting votes right now. Let's talk about the governor's race, your big thoughts in terms of where we're at and some of the messaging we're hearing so far, including from Javier Becerra in the last 10 minutes.
You know, it's kind of interesting. I mean, the end of the governor race and the beginning of the Gavin Newsom 28 presidential race has been kind of dissonant. Really, almost all of the governor candidates have basically been portraying California as off on the wrong track and needing a fundamental change of one kind or another, which is not exactly consonant with his California miracle that he's delivered, for example, at the Center for American Progress a couple weeks ago. Becerra is the somewhat of exception. Is the closest thing to Becerra. Becerra basically says there's a lot going right in California, but we've got to do better at including everyone in it. And that is something that I think is more comfortable for Newsom. I think Hilton's problem is that his core message has been road tested in blue states and fundamentally rejected. I mean, you know, Donald Trump looms over this heavily. And Hilton's message, like the Republican gubernatorial candidates last year in Virginia and New Jersey, is the state will be better off with a governor who works with him than one who fights him. And that simply did not work. Over 90% of voters who disapproved of Trump voted Democratic in the New Jersey and Virginia governor's race. And I think when we get to November, you're going to see the same thing here.
Yeah, it's interesting because to that point, Javier Becerra came on this show and I asked him about what would be a policy you would change. He didn't come up with one.
Oh, Lord.
All of his opponents on the Democratic side shared that out as an example of something that was bad, and yet he's winning.
This is the confusing thing about Javier Becerra's success in this race. When Eric Swalwell imploded and voters just kind of moved to Becerra and stuck there, a lot of people in our circles out here in California were asking, why? This is a 68-year-old who was in Congress for 20 years, a long time ago, not exactly the dynamic future of the Republican Party. Yes, has appealed to non-white voters, Latinos especially here in Los Angeles because of his long experience in politics. But Katie Porter called him out in one of the debates for not having any ideas around tax policy. You know, he just doesn't seem like a nimble thinker, a strategist, like a good policy guy. I talked to... But this was an open secret during the campaign because people were quoted. Susan Rice called him an idiot. Many people in the Biden administration thought Becerra was an empty suit. And I've quoted them in my articles. Lots of people have. But here's the thing. He felt like a safe choice for voters after they shopped around.
Wasn't he Biden 2020? I mean, really, basically, you can't separate Becerra from the fear among Democrats of being locked out. And for none of these Democratic candidates have really excited the Democratic base or galvanized them. And what most Democrats, I think, in the state wanted was what most Democratic presidential primary voters wanted in 2020. They just wanted someone to get into the general against the Republican, stop the Trump acolyte from being governor, and Becerra, like Biden in 20, seemed like the safe choice.
And Becerra may now be able to campaign in the basement.
Right.
Your thoughts on all of this, and Steve Hilton, somebody that you like and support.
Yeah, Steve is definitely something that I like and support, and I would disagree with you because I actually think he's already run a very different campaign than Winsome Sears did in Virginia, and I'm blanking on the Republican candidate's name in New Jersey because but to that point, he's actually run on issues that make sense for every single California voter. The affordability issue, no income tax on the first $100,000 that you make, affordable gas like $3 and under, getting government out of the way that allows people to succeed. I think a lot of the language that you're hearing from Tom Steyer and Becerra is, oh, big bad rich people have made California this way. No, government overreach and government failure has made California this way. And if you want a change, don't vote for the person with the D after their name because it's the Democratic Party that has ruined this great state.
This billionaire tax is probably going to be on the ballot in November. It'll be very interesting to see Javier Becerra's reaction.
This is a question to basically tax the wealth of people over who have over $1 billion, a 5% tax on them. It's something that the current governor, Gavin Newsom, says would be bad news for California, and yet it could be a big thing.
In the debate, Steyer was the only one who said it was.
Who is a billionaire.
I would say, Hilton is very effective making a case against the status quo in California.
And that's why Becerra won't have the guts to debate him.
But
let's hope not. I hope they do it on CNN.
I think it is kind of wishful thinking to assume that as a Republican, he can ignore the intense disapproval of Trump in the state and the feeling that Trump is targeting the state. And I think that his assertion.
But he doesn't. But he doesn't lean in. But he doesn't lean in.
You can ignore it, but I don't think that you can ignore the actual needs of voters from the border all the way up past the Bay Area.
I think as much as these candidates are trying to talk, some of them, about policy ideas, affordability, yes, here in LA, homelessness and crime. Prop 50 was a great example of just bundling together a bunch of anti-Trump paid media, as Gavin Newsom did on that campaign, around an issue that was semi-related, redistricting and gerrymandering, et cetera. It was just stop Trump, stop Trump, stop Trump, stop Trump. And that ballot measure won last year.
Like I said, real quick, Ron, last word.
Unless you signal that you're willing to stand up for the state against him, I think it's in a blue-purplish state. It's really hard for a Republican when his disapproval is as high as it is now.
I mean, maybe it's because I was homeschooled, guys, but there is a very big difference between the executive branch of the federal government and the executive branch of the state, and maybe the California voters need to recognize that the president doesn't greatly affect what we do here. The governor does.
It'll be interesting to see if Hilton's message towards Trump changes if he's able to advance and doesn't have to now get the base behind him. All right, we'll talk more in the next hour. We're going to sneak a quick break in right now. More election night coverage after this. Karen Bass is headed to a runoff in November, hoping to keep her job as the mayor of Los Angeles. Her opponent, we don't know yet, as we see Spencer Pratt and Nithya Raman battling out for that. Melanie Mason is California bureau chief for Politico, one of our favorites. She joins us live from Politico in Sacramento. Melanie, your reading on the mayor's race so far?
Look, I think that this is a testament to expectation setting is everything, right? Because let's level set. She's an incumbent who is going to be going to a runoff. In Los Angeles, for mayors, that's extremely rare. So that's not a good thing, right? And yet, because you had Spencer Pratt saying that he was going to win outright in May or in June, I actually think that this looks quite good for her. So I think that she actually overperformed the expectations of the last couple of weeks in the run-up to this. And so I think her team's feeling pretty good tonight.
And what about Pratt? Where does he go from here?
I think that it'll be very interesting to see if he does get into the runoff. And I still think we really do want to see how these later votes come in. We know that they do tend to track pretty blue, but this is a big gap for Nithya Raman to make up. But if he makes it into the top two, does he continue on sort of the messaging that he has taken up into this point? I mean, he is now going to be in sort of a one-on-one. He clearly has struck a nerve in terms of his, touching at the frustrations that Los Angelinos are feeling about her mayorship. But it's also going to be a highly, highly partisan election in November, and you're going to get Democrats that are turning out to sort of stick it to Trump in many other ways. And if you have video everywhere of Trump calling him very MAGA, I think it's going to be hard for him to distance himself from that quasi-endorsement he got from the president.
Melanie Mason, one of our favorites. You can read more of her work tomorrow in the Politico California Playbook. Thanks for stopping in. Good luck with the rest of your work tonight. And thanks for watching this special hour of The Story Is. We're not done. We got a whole nother hour with our incredible two panels. Lots to get through. Stay with us. You're watching Election Night in America on CNN. And welcome to Election Night in America. I'm Alex Michelson. Thanks for joining us here on The Story Is. We continue into another hour of coverage as we are watching 6 states holding primaries, including New Jersey, South Dakota, and Iowa. But some of the biggest races are taking place right here in California, and the results are coming in. Let's start with the race for California governor. Right now, It is a two-person race at the top. Steve Hilton, Republican, at 26.9. Javier Becerra, Democrat, former HHS Secretary, at 25.8. Tom Steyer hoping that late results will bring him into the top two. There's still a lot of counting left in California, but he's got a big margin to make up. We've also been talking about the mayor's race, and there we can now project that Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, will advance to a runoff. She was not able to get 50% plus one, so there will be a runoff. Question is, who is she going to be in a runoff with? We heard from Spencer Pratt earlier, who was feeling very confident that he is going to be the person in that runoff. We have not yet heard from Nithya Raman, LA City Councilwoman, speaking tonight. Let's bring in our chief data analyst, Harry Enton, staying up late for a special California edition of the Magic Wall. Harry, what are you seeing in the numbers right now?
Well, staying up late? No. In college time, this would be very early for me. When the college basketball team went out for its morning practice, that was when it was time to go to sleep. When the sun rises in the east, that's when it's like, it's still early here, and I'm glad to be with you. Look, what am I seeing here, Alex? What am I seeing here? Well, I mean, look, you've been talking about it, right? Which is right now we're looking in California. You're looking at that gubernatorial race. Look, the name of the game is to finish in the top two to advance to November. We got Steve Hilton in the #1 spot, 26.9%. We have Javier Becerra, 25.8%. Then in the third spot, the only guy who's anywhere close is Tom Steyer at 19.8%. The next Republican, Chad Bianco, way back at 11.2%. The question is, as we get the final 50% of the vote in, right now you can see right here we get 50% of the estimated vote in, can Tom Steyer close the gap between himself and either Javier Becerra or Steve Hilton? Will we end up with one Republican and one Democrat, or two Democrats finishing up in those top two results and heading out to November? Now, right now, what we see in the polling results, which I think is really important, is if you know anything about these candidates' home bases, where they're from, it turns out that Tom Steyer is from the San Francisco area. But what's going on in the San Francisco area? I've circled it for you here on the map. It is all in Columbia blue. Columbia blue. Javier Becerra is actually winning in Tom Steyer's home area at this point. And more than that, Javier Becerra is also leading if we go down to his home area in Los Angeles County. He's at 29.4%. Steyer's back at 22.6%. The other thing that I will note so far than what we're seeing and what we expect to happen as the results come in is that we know that there are a lot of votes still out. There's still that 50% still out. In prior years, and what the pre-election polling suggested would happen, is that those results, those late ballots that were submitted and will be counted later, tend to be more Democratic leaning. So right now, we saw Javier Becerra come out last hour. My bet is this 25.8% will either hold, it might go up a little bit. But the question is, what will happen to right now this 26.9% that Steve Hilton has? Is that going to go down, which historical trends would indicate is a very decent possibility? And then will Tom Steyer's 19.7%. We just got some new, hey, we got new results right here on the air. Yes, we're now up to 51% of the vote, now on the other side of 50%. But will this 19.7% for Steyer continue to rise as late ballots arrive? Will that actually go up? History suggests that it is a real possibility that that does, in fact, happen. Now, the one other thing I will note, because you know what, we've been talking so much about this gubernatorial race, I did want to hit on one House race out in California. Now, if I can do this correctly, let's see if I can zoom in on it. I want to go to the San Francisco Bay Area, go to San Francisco. This is Nancy Pelosi's district. Now, what is so interesting here is Nancy Pelosi actually endorsed the candidate right now that is in second place. And more than that, the candidate that used to work for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, look at this, all the way back at 14.9%. Scott Wiener is the leader in this race right now with 41.3%. Just like in the gubernatorial race, it is the top two that would advance. So right now it looks like Nancy Pelosi's pick will advance, and more than that, it looks like Scott Wiener's pick will advance. But the candidate that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did not endorse but used to work for her, he spent a lot of money on this race. But at this point, Alex Michelson, it does not look like he will advance. But as we were talking about at the top, again, the story being in the gubernatorial race, as we zoom out here, hello, let's see if I can do this correctly. There we go. We did it. We did it. Steve Hilton won, and then Javier Becerra 2. The question will be, can Tom Steyer close that gap and end up in the top two? Yeah. We're just going to have to wait and see. But you know what? We're going to be here all night, baby. Yeah.
For a moment, you were making Donald Trump very happy there when you had all
I know,
red.
California.
That's gonna be a screenshot that somebody's gonna use, Harry Enton.
Hey, you know,
so,
he's a fan of mine, and maybe he'll
He's a
screenshot
huge fan
that.
of you. I think you're his favorite person on CNN. You and
No,
Scott
you know what?
Jennings.
And my mother's also a big fan of mine as well. So there we go. My mother and Donald Trump.
Jewish
What a
mothers.
duo.
It's all about that. All right, Harry Enton, thank you so much. We're going to bring in a Jewish mother and grandmother and former senator from California, Barbara Boxer, joining us, along with former Lieutenant Governor of California, Abel Maldonado, a Republican, worked in the Schwarzenegger administration, and Paul Mitchell, the Vice President of Political Data and owner of Redistricting Partners. Welcome back for people that have been watching our coverage. You joined us a little bit earlier. Since then, we have seen new developments in the governor's race. We've heard from Javier Becerra tonight as well, casting his potential moving on as a historic moment in California, the first potential Latino governor of the state in modern history. Your thoughts on what Becerra's message is tonight?
I was very touched by his remarks. I'm a first-generation American on my mother's side. My mother was, she escaped from Europe. She was a little baby in her mother's arms. And America speaks to me as a country of immigrants. And I think it's so historic. We haven't really discussed that, you know, with Javier being a potential governor, especially in a time when you have the Trump administration demonizing immigrants, using secret police, putting people away in these horrible prisons and treating them badly. I think we haven't discussed that enough, and it touches my heart.
Let's listen in to some of Javier Becerra a little while ago.
There are powerful forces aligned to darken our light. Distrust, disinformation, division, and distraction. Make no mistake, those forces did not want tonight to happen because their success depends on our failure. The last thing these forces want is a working class governor with a law degree and a union card ready to call them out.
What do you make of that message?
You know, that's the Democrat message, and he's talking to the Democrat voters. At the end of the day, Javier Becerra is going to have to start talking about what's he going to do about gas prices, what's he going to do about homelessness, what's he going to do about the cost of living. Alex, you've asked him some questions. A lot of people have asked him questions. His answer was, we're the fourth largest economy in the world. So from now on, I mean, I think obviously he's going to be the nominee for the Democrat Party, and he's got his work cut out. There's no doubt he's got a tremendous advantage.
Because of that advantage, does he actually have to answer those questions?
You know,
or is saying I'm the Democrat and I'm anti-Trump, is that enough in deep blue California when election after election after election, that's been a pretty successful message?
Well, during the primary, he said that he built a strength around, I sued President Trump 120 times, and that he says he won a lot. So that's not going to cut it for the California voters, I don't believe, in the next 5 months. They want to know, what are you going to do to fix the state? The state is not in great shape. I mean, I think we all know that. So, again, his advantage, he's got a tremendous registration advantage. The question is he going to tell us point by point what he's going to do? I can guarantee you this. Steve Hilton, he's got a simple message. It's simple, and it's going to get out there. So there's going to be some debates, and we're going to be able to have a good look at two candidates.
You study the data, Paul, in terms of where the electorate actually is. So what do the numbers show us in terms of what is driving people right now?
Well, what's interesting is months ago, the Becerra campaign staff sent me one of their internal polls, and they listed all the issues: homelessness, housing, education, the environment, jobs, affordability. And the bottom listed issue was someone who can fight Trump. It was the lowest polling at like 35%. And I said to them, send me the crosstabs. And when I looked at the crosstabs, the Democratic voters, the number one issue was somebody who can fight Trump. Mm-hmm. So that was really kind of the table stakes in this governor's race for the Democratic candidates. You know, that's, I think, why Matt Mahan, as an example, didn't really break through, because he didn't have that. But now, as we go
why Eric Swalwell is doing so well.
Yeah.
I mean, Eric Swalwell's whole thing was, I'm the Trump fighter. I'm going to impeach him. I'm going to make social media videos saying F you to him. and that was doing really well. And then when he was out, then people were looking for somebody to fight Trump. Right?
And Addisu Dumase on the earlier segment really hit it. But when Swalwell dropped out, the Democratic base was looking for somebody. And here's, a candidate, Becerra, who had sued Trump 120 times as a former statewide elected official, was somebody who actually had a positive favorability, which Addisu also mentioned, this underlying positive number. And voters gravitated to him, I swear, organically. The people most surprised by Becerra's rise into the pack was Becerra's campaign itself. It's really an interesting story after the fact to look at somebody who was fighting to be on the debate stage, as you mentioned, in 4.2%.
Yeah.
And then became relevant.
And to this point, just real quickly, Senator Boxer,
I'll be very
because there's a sort of question about where the Democratic base is. You endorsed Antonio Villaraigosa,
I sure did.
who in a lot of ways was running against the status quo of the party. Matt Mahan, the mayor of San Jose, was running against the status quo of the party. And the guy who, frankly, was more status quo than anybody, won. So it makes you think maybe voters aren't looking for somebody to fight the party.
Can I just say the party? I never understood that. I ran as Barbara Boxer, a Democrat, a proud Democrat. Didn't mean I agreed with everything, no. But I think when you say you're running against Trump, it means you're for health care. It means you're for raising the minimum wage. It means you're for building the infrastructure. It means you're for working people. So all this chit-chat from my darling friend over here, I think at the end of the day, and he calls it the Democrat Party. That's rude. It's the Democratic Party. But I think the point about it is, we are for the working people. And, Javier or Steyer, whoever it was going to be, Antonio Villaraigosa, my favorite, they were all going to be for working families. And that's what Democrats are for. Now, are we perfect? No. Do we make mistakes? Yes. We don't get our messaging right. That's true. But I think in their hearts of hearts, the people know who's on their side.
We're going to sneak in a quick break. You're all standing by. We're going to come back with more of our conversation.
We're standing by again.
We're standing by. It's got a lot to talk about. We'll be back with more on election night in America, including Barbara Boxer standing by. Welcome back. We're closely tracking the results of key primary elections in 6 states ahead of November's midterm general election. That includes major races right here in California for governor and LA mayor. Let's talk about the governor's race right now with Fabian Nunez. He is the former Speaker of the California State Assembly, current founder and managing partner at Actum. He joins us live from Paris. How about that? Good morning to you, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning. Well, actually, good evening or morning there, and morning here, evening there, whatever time it is in Los Angeles. Happy to be with you, Alex.
So you're waking up to these results of what we're seeing in right now. It looks good for Javier Becerra and Steve Hilton. Tom Steyer hoping for a late surge in the next few weeks to bring him into the top two. How do you read this? And what are your sort of most important thoughts about the governor's race right now?
Well, a couple of things on the governor's race. It's interesting listening to all of the national news around this with all the outlets that are kind of reading into what's happening in California. And I'm hearing a lot of people talk about how California is in trouble, how California is in a bad place. The fact of the matter is that, California continues to be the strongest state in the nation. Economic growth has been solid in the state. The other thing that's interesting is that the California dream of opportunity is alive and kicking in this state. Now, we have an affordability problem like many other states do. And certainly, living under the thumb of the Trump administration and all of the things that has brought to the rest of the country, California is feeling that as well. And so, yeah, we're in the governor's race. And yeah, some people are disenchanted with their situation, and they should be. I think voters speak loudly. But the fact of the matter is we have some great candidates running for governor. Obviously, I supported Antonio Villaraigosa in this race. He's not going to make it tonight, but Javier Becerra is. And so I'm very happy for the Democratic Party, not just for Latinos, but for the future of our party, because I think we'll have a steady hand in the governor's race. And, just with respect to Steve Hilton, it's interesting because, he's been saying a lot of platitudes in this race. And if you listen to him on the debates, the things that he's been focused on has been, very much on the surface. When you ask him deeper questions, he doesn't necessarily have a real set of issues and plans to see what he's going to do to fix the problems that California confronts. But he's going to have to confront something. Given that I'm in Europe, I can say this now, is that he was central to the Brexit situation in the UK. And Brexit, as you know, totally devastated the economy in the United Kingdom, such that countries like France and Germany have taken the lead over England. England was positioned to be the strongest economy in Europe. And thanks to what they did over Brexit, which really was a falling out with people in the UK that didn't want immigration. And so he ruined the economy in the UK, and now he immigrated to California to try and be our governor. He's going to have to answer a lot of questions about not only the fact that his plans are very, very weak, there's no substance to them, but his own past. And I think that's going to be very critical for someone like him to try to win any voters outside of the MAGA Republicans.
He would say that he wants to do a tax cut for everybody making under $100,000, that he wants to cut regulations to help increase building. He wants to cut regulations for oil and gas companies so that there can be more drilling and lower the cost of gas. And I'm just curious. I mean, I know a lot of people have a hard time paying attention to American politics. How many California voters do you think are up on the Brexit situation as a voting issue?
Well, they're not up on it, but they certainly will be before the November election. People will be reminded of how poorly his judgment was in ruining one of the strongest economies in Europe. But the other thing that's really interesting, you talk about the tax issue, which no one's challenged him on this, and he will be challenged on. He wants to say, if you make under $100,000, you will pay no taxes in California. The California tax base is 100% dependent on the personal income tax. Without those taxpayers that make $100,000 or less, the California economy will collapse of its own weight. So clearly, he doesn't have an understanding of how the California economy works. And maybe he needs to go to school and learn, because he's going to have to learn very quickly if he's going to be in this runoff.
He said, when I challenged him on that, that the fraud is so great in California, it would make up the difference. But we'll, I'm sure, have more opportunities to talk about all these issues if he indeed makes the top two.
You know, Alex, Elon Musk tried to say the same thing about the federal government, and they did Doge, and they came back and they accomplished zero. And that's been done before in California. Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was elected, he said he was going to get rid of the fraud, waste, and abuse. And I love Arnold. He's one of my closest friends. But there was no fraud, waste, and abuse to be found.
Well, we know there is fraud, waste, and abuse in California and in the federal government. The question is, how much of it is there? Fabian Nunez, thank you for joining us. Always a pleasure to talk with you, my friend. Thanks for being with us. Let's talk about some of the congressional races. And this is an important thing as well. We haven't talked that much about. And let's put some of those numbers up on to our big board right now. This is an interesting race. This is in the California 48th District. This is parts of San Diego and Riverside County. Jim Desmond, Republican, is doing well there. There's a big battle, though, for second place. Who would face off? This is one of those redrawn districts that Darrell Issa is currently in. Marnie Von Wilpert looks to be doing well against Amar Kampa-Najjar so far in terms of the early numbers there. Let's look at the 32nd district. This is a race where Brad Sherman, who has been in the seat since 1997, 71 years old, being challenged by Jake Levine, who is a millennial. Brad Sherman and Larry Thompson out ahead. Jake Levine would have to make up a lot of ground at this point to make it into the top two. If that is a Sherman versus Thompson race, that means that Sherman most likely would win in a very Democratic district. Let's look at the 40th district. This is one of the redrawn districts where you now have two Republicans running against each other who are both incumbent members of Congress. Ken Calvert and Young Kim, both doing well in this district. Esther Kim Verrett, the Democrat, they're trying to get into the top two as we get more returns. We'll see if she's able to get there or if there will be two active members of Congress running against each other. The reason why that's happening is the guy who's on our panel right now, Paul Mitchell, who literally drew some of these district lines after Prop 50 gerrymandered the state. California voters approved your maps through Proposition 50 pretty overwhelmingly, and a long way to say. How are you reading the congressional races right now? What's standing out to you?
Well, that Kim Calvert seat, I think we should find out who did that. We got to look for him.
My friend, that was all you,
that
my
is
friend.
the only remaining, Republican congressional district in all of Southern California. And it was even possible at a time that Darrell Issa was going to run there. There might have been a three-way Republican race there. In terms of the whole state, there are 5 districts that were drawn to create a pushback on what was done in Texas, where the California voters got together essentially and approved Prop 50 to draw these seats. Now, when we drew these seats, we knew that they were going to be Republican or Democratic leaning on paper, but we always have to have the elections. And so in that 48th congressional district, there was a poll out that showed that they might get 2 Republicans in the top 2, box out the Democrats entirely, but that's not happened. Looks like the Democrat and Republican are going to face off there. In the throughout the state, the Central Valley, there's a critical district with David Valadeo's district, where 2 Democrats, one more left-leaning and one more centrist, running there. That's still competitive. Up in Northern California, Kevin Kiley, who re-registered to be independent and switched districts in order to run for re-election. We might have a top 2 situation there where there's a second-place Republican who is in 3rd place right now, or a second Republican who's in 3rd place, and we could have a situation where Kiley faces off against a Republican boxing out the Democrats. So there's still a lot of votes to count there. It'll probably move back towards the Democrats more, but these races, these districts can be drawn one way, but you have to have the actual races, too. I mean, this is democracy.
You endorsed one
Yes,
person in all of this, which is Marnie von Wilpert. She was in a really competitive race against Tamar Kompanajari, and so far looks like she's doing very well.
It's looking so good. I just wanted to give a shout out to the voters there because we had so many Democrats vying for that. We once thought 2 Republicans could wind up on top. It didn't work out that way. I just want to say about Marnie, just here and now, keep your eye on her. She's special. And, you've got Emily's List supporting her. You've got the women, members of Congress supporting her. We still don't have enough women in the House and Senate. We're at about a third. We need to be at about 50%. Keep your eye on Marnie. I think she's going to do it. She's a special person.
A lot better than when you first went there with Barbara
There were
Boxer.
2 women in the Senate. Can you imagine when Diane and I walked in? And last thing I'll say, because I know you don't have a lot of time for me, but we had 2 women, and then it went to 6, and everyone says, it's the year of the woman.
The year of the woman.
We tripled our numbers, but we just went from 2 to 6, and there were 94 guys. We have a long way to go.
Last thought on the congressional races real quick, Abel.
This man right here, our man right here, he made some changes. And I got to tell you, it's the Proposition 50 was a foundation of the redistricting here. And Californians came out and voted in huge numbers, which is a number, if I'm Steve Hilton, I'm looking at that election as well. And that was a totally you got to vote against Trump, vote for Prop 50. Look what happened.
That messaging was good for Prop 50. That messaging was good when Gavin Newsom ran for his reelection. That messaging was good for the recall when Gavin Newsom beat that as well. He ran 3
100%.
Statewide races basically with that message. Thank you all for being here tonight, staying up late with us. We really appreciate it. Our second panel is going to join after this, but this is when we say goodbye to all of you. Really fun enjoying this history with you. Senator, always a pleasure.
Thank your
you,
mom
Lieutenant
for the
Governor.
cookies.
My mom baked cookies for
and
everybody.
And she made brownies, and they were so good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be back with more of our coverage, including our next panel. Stay with us. You're watching Election Night in America on The Story Is. Welcome back. We are following several key primary races around the country. CNN chief data analyst Harry Enton standing by in New York at the Magic Wall. Not only California, but we're also looking Iowa, New Jersey, around the country as well. Right, Harry?
We are. I got 2.5 minutes, so we're going to call this the 2.5 minutes around the United States of America, all right? I'm going to start off where you are right now in Los Angeles. Karen Bass, who we say is going to advance, she's at 36.5% of the vote. Spencer Pratt at 29.5%. But Rahman has actually been coming up. She's now at 21% of the vote. That is actually higher. She has actually been doing significantly better in the last few batches. And we only have 49% of the vote in, if you can read my handwriting up here. So as the additional 51% of the vote comes in, it's going to be very interesting to see if Rahman can, in fact, close that gap between her and Spencer Pratt. If she does as well as she's done the last few ballot drops, she may very well do that. So we're going to keep our eye out on that. But, of course, beyond Los Angeles mayor, what are we dealing with? Well, of course, we're talking about California governor. It's been the story all night long. Top two advance, right? Steve Hilton, Javier Becerra, 1 and 2 right now. You see a lot more red and that Columbia blue for Javier Becerra than you see for the dark blue, the navy blue for Tom Steyer. But again, what we're expecting now with 48%, hey, we gained an additional point in terms of the vote coming in. As the additional votes come in, again, those who submitted their ballots late tended to be more Democratic. So I think the question is, do we end up with a Hilton-Becerra, or do we end up with a Hilton-Steyer? I don't think that's particularly likely. But what could happen is Becerra and Steyer end up in the top two, and Hilton goes, adios amigos, goodbye, see you later. Now, we were talking about the continent, right? The continent, we're talking about the country within the continent, the United States of America. So I want to go out back to the center of the country. Why do I want to go to the center of the country? I want to go to the great state of Iowa. Obviously, the Iowa caucuses is where it all began when Donald Trump first ran back in 2016. It was the first contest. He lost there back in 2016, and guess what? Donald Trump, his endorsed candidate, Randy Feenstra, actually lost in a Republican primary. The candidate that Donald Trump backed lost. That, I believe, is the first time I have seen that in a gubernatorial primary this entire year. Zach Lane, who in fact was not endorsed, he was a Maha guy, actually won that primary, winning by just a little bit, 37.8 to 37%. But you know what? 0.8 points being on the plus side of the ledger is a whole heck of a lot better than being 0.8 points on the negative side of the ledger. So Donald Trump's impeccable record in Republican primaries, adios amigos, goodbye tonight. So the story's still out in California, but a lot of stuff happening throughout the rest of the country. And Alex, I am very much having the energy, despite the fact that it is only 2:33 here in the East.
What are we doing? Are we doing coffee? Are we doing what's the routine to get us to that level at 2:30 in the morning, where clearly you're going onto the Spanish version of Harry Enton?
Hola, ¿cómo estás? Look, I would say that it is just being with you, and you know what? A little A&W cream soda, even without the caffeine, always provides the boost for me.
That's all he needs. Harry Enton, thank you so much for bringing the energy. Here to bring in more energy is our panel. Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst, opinion columnist for Bloomberg. Alicia Krause, conservative commentator, op-ed writer for the Washington Examiner. And Peter Hamby, founding partner at Puck News and host of Snapchat's Good Luck America. All right, Ron, you've been chomping at the bit to get in on this Iowa governor's race. What stands out to you about that? A big loss for Donald Trump.
Yeah, surprising. You know, as Harry said, I mean, his record has been really strong. But Iowa, I think, is really indicative of how the boundary that's going to decide how far Democrats get in this election. If you look at what happened in 2018, they basically ran the table in the House just about on the white-collar suburban districts that have been drifting away from the Republican Party, and that Trump has particularly alienated. And you saw tonight, New Jersey 7 is one that they still hope to win. There's the Don Bacon seat in Omaha they still hope to win. Mike Lawler in New York, but there's not that many left of them. And Iowa is really where the main battleground is now. If you're looking whether the governor's race there, the Senate race, or especially the House races, they are predominantly blue-collar electorates. They're working-class white electorates, which is what Trump has really consolidated for the Republican Party. He's won 2/3 of whites without a college degree in each of his 3 races. But now in national polling, his approval among them is down to around 50-50, very consistently in polling across the board. And the question will be, is that enough to get Democrats back in the game in districts like that in Iowa, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania? That is Democrats can win a narrow majority in the House just by winning places like New Jersey 7. To get anywhere into something, a governing majority or a stable majority, they have to win races like the ones in Iowa, whether it's the governor race or in those House races.
So, Peter, New Jersey 7 is a district that is now represented by a Republican congressman named Thomas Kean Jr. We have no idea where he is. He is out on some sort of medical something, and his team will not say where he is. He's missed a whole lot of votes. Rebecca Bennett, the Democrat, is going to now be taking him on. These are the kinds of races Democrats need to win at a baseline if they're going to take back the
So
House.
this seat is specifically, there's vanishingly fewer true swing seats.
Yeah, as we
in
gerrymander,
Congress.
there's
This
very
is one of
few of
them,
them,
New Jersey
yeah.
7, right? Like New Jersey suburbs, a little more affluent, whiter. Tom Kaine Jr. has represented that seat for 2 terms now. Famous name in New Jersey. But you're right, he's been missing for almost 3 months, actually, and he has not explained where he is with this medical issue. I talked to a leadership aide, a Republican leadership aide today on Capitol Hill, who said the way they've handled this, the Kaine campaign, is atrocious. They are, quote, deeply worried about this seat now. And then you have Rebecca Bennett, who just won that seat. I don't know that much about her, but I spent some time like following her campaign a little bit today, reading up on her. I mean, just kind of like a mini Mikey Sherrill, who won the governor's race last year. Former military, mom, very focused on affordability, public safety, all the bread and butter issues that Democrats are trying to focus on to win these swing seats. And also, to Ron's point, those like river counties too in Iowa, those places that flipped from Obama to Trump back in 2016, the blue collar working class counties. So they got to do both. They got to win in Trump areas, and then they got to hold on to these must-win swing seats.
How do you see the state of the House races right now, Alicia?
Ooh, I don't know. I'm not as enthusiastic as Speaker Johnson is. I think that historically, being the political nerds that we are, we all know that it can be difficult for, you know, the party in power in the White House to maintain power when it comes to the House and the Senate. But I am going to be slightly optimistic, even for the Democratic viewers tonight, and say I think that if the Democratic Party, even here in California, maybe not with Becerra at the top of the ticket going through to November, but you see those races where Nithya Raman running as like a very hardcore Mamdani type, you know, kissing the ring of racist and anti-Semite Hassan Piker, and you know the radical,
that, of course.
okay, and the radical that you know was running against, that had worked for AOC and Bernie Sanders, that was running to replace Nancy Pelosi. There are pockets all around the country, not just here in California, where you saw Democratic voters saying, you know, we're not okay with this drastic progressivism that is the DSA. We kind of want somebody that maybe will go up against Donald Trump and some of the things that they disagree with on the Republican side, but not so crazy socialist left. And I think that if I'm a hardcore conservative right here, but I think it's actually better for the American public when the Democratic Party can kind of moderate and move more to the middle, and then hopefully both sides can talk and work together.
You see some mixed results tonight, right? Like you have the David Valadao seat, the progressive is ahead. You mentioned the woman from San Diego is
Marnie Von Wilper.
is doing it. You know, there doesn't seem to be a decisive winner in the Democratic primaries this year. I mean, there's Graham Plattner, there's El Said in Michigan. We'll see how that plays out. But I do generally agree that, you know, going into 2020, there was a belief among many Democrats that the backlash against Trump meant that the voters were demanding that the party move way to the left. That didn't play out so well in 2020, and it even had, you know, implications all the way to 24 in terms of what Harris did. Now there's more of a push on both sides of the party.
Real quick. I mean, I'm not going to like brief the entire world on national TV about my local race on the west side of LA, but there's a state Senate race on the west side of LA and a city council race on the west side of LA. And the winning city council member is just a Democrat who is blowing out a DSA candidate right now just on back to basics things, cleaning up the streets, getting homeless folks off the streets and into shelters, cleaning up parks, like all of these back to basics things. And I do think Ron's right. There's been some generational upstarts running tonight that fell short and might fall short. We don't know all the results. And then also, I think the challengers from the left are also in the cycle not exactly gaining steam. We'll see what happens with Plattner and also I'll say out of Michigan, though.
And also, there is a difference between a true local race and some of these congressional races, which are so much more about national issues these days. All right, we're going to have more with you guys in a moment. We're going to sneak in a commercial break. We also have Mike Madrid, who knows so much about especially the governor's race here in California, joining us. Stay with us. You're watching The Story Is Election Night. The story is it's election night in America. Results still coming in for California's governor's race, the mayor's race in L.A., where candidates have been courting the Latino vote. Joining us now is one of the experts in that space, Mike Madrid, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, founder of the Latino Working Class Project. Mike joins us from London. Good morning to you.
Alex, good morning to you. Good evening to you.
Yeah, so you're looking deep into the numbers on the governor's race right now. What stands out to you that maybe the average person isn't seeing?
Well, look, we do stand on the cusp of potentially having a Latino well-positioned to become governor for the first time in 150 years. As somebody who's been studying that vote, this is a pretty big breakthrough moment. One of the fascinating things is you are seeing Becerra winning this vote, the Latino vote, but not by the margins that I think that you would expect. What he is doing is he's commanding a much larger share of kind of white upper middle class voters. So you're seeing these oddities like Napa County, East Bay counties performing better for Javier Becerra than you would expect. Tom Steyer actually keeping those margins closer in some heavy Hispanic communities. This is changing the way I think the Democratic Party is going to approach politics. It's certainly leading us to a new chapter of California politics. And I think that the way that we look at coalitions are going to be very, very different going forward.
You've known Javier Becerra for decades. You've worked with and worked against so many of the state's top Latino leaders. Is he the one that you would have thought would be the one to get that job?
That's a great question. The answer, I suppose, would be no. I didn't. He was always kind of the person who was always putting in the work, quietly making policy happen. He's that, the reputation he has of being kind of this, more of an accountant than he is a barn burner on the campaign trail. But that's clearly the moment. So much of politics is timing, and his time came. It arrived, and he, I think, is meeting the moment, at least as it relates to campaigns. What his leadership style is going to be going forward, I think, is kind of going to be up to him. People change when they become the executive of a state this big. He will be challenged, and I think all of his experience over 35 years of California policymaking has prepared him for this moment. He's obviously got the general against Steve Hilton is the way it looks. If that's the case, I think you're going to see some real concerted focus about addressing middle class issues in a way that we haven't really seen over the past 16 or so years in California.
What would you say, and this is just really quick because we're almost out of time, is the percentage chance at this point for Tom Steyer to make the top two?
Oh, I think it's less than 25%, less than 20%. And that number's, he's down 7 points right now, basically statewide 6 points. He's going to have to dramatically outperform on election day, not just those 6 points, but overcome some significant barriers. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? No.
Mike Madrid, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate the straight talk. More of our panel when we come back. Turning now to the California primaries, where the crowded race for governor is starting to open up. The state runs what's called a jungle primary, top two vote getters, regardless of party. And that's a look at where the numbers are right now. Our panel, final thoughts after a busy night on our 4-hour show. Peter Hamby, final thoughts.
I think whatever happens with Spencer Pratt, unlikely to win if he advances to the general election. But the story of Spencer Pratt is a reminder to Democrats that they can't abandon public safety as an issue that people care about. It really is something that median voters don't believe Democrats care about, even today. And Karen Bass and Nithya Raman didn't really address it over the last year or so. Spencer Pratt stepped in there, grabbed it for himself, and, affordability, public safety, these are things that matter to normal people rather than academic issues or talking point plans or academic plans that Democrats have been talking about for years and years now. It's back to basics.
Alicia, final thoughts.
I would say that maybe the Democrats need to not rely so much on every Republican is a mini Trump, because not every Republican is a mini Trump. And clearly every Democrat who's been running the state for the last 16 years has utterly failed, has been serving every Democrat that served the city of LA, including, former Mayor Garcetti, who was here earlier, I would argue has utterly failed. So that argument isn't going to work with the average voter, I think, for the long haul. Maybe it'll work for them in November. I sure as heck hope it doesn't, but maybe a little advice to the Democrats: get different talking points and start to do things, or you're going to continue to see incumbents like Karen Bass not do so hot.
But I mean, is there an example, though, of Democrats in this state losing when using that strategy, actually losing at an election?
I mean, there's been some close calls, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a reason why Gavin Newsom and the Democrats wanted to gerrymander so bad.
I think that's good advice for 2028, and Democrats clearly have a lot of their own image to refurbish. But I think the history is pretty clear, at least for the last several decades, that by far the single most important factor in a midterm election is voters' assessments of the sitting president, far more than the view of the party that's out of the White House. You know, in 2018, 90% of voters who said they disapproved of Trump voted Democratic for the House. In 2020, it was 93%. Susan Collins, in his first term, was the only Republican Senate incumbent or challenger who won in a state where his approval rating was net negative. And I think that is the challenge facing Republicans. It's challenge facing Democrats. In the red states, they have to win for the Senate. If Trump's above 50, it's going to be really hard in places like Texas, Iowa, and Ohio. But anywhere where Trump is under 50 is going to be competitive. And the fact that that now extends potentially to some of these blue-collar districts, too, in places like Iowa, Ohio, and Wisconsin, that's what gives the Democrats the opportunity to build a little bit of a cushion in the House.
I think a lot of voters, including Democratic voters that I talk to, because heck, I live in a liberal mecca, and 90% of my circle of friends and family are on the left, is they want to hear solutions from Democrats. They don't just want to hear Trump bad, Orange Man bad. You have small business owners. You have multi-generational immigrant families. You have public school teachers that are going, okay, so Democrats, yes, I agree, Trump bad, but what are you going to do for me?
But quickly, Peter, the folks that really made those arguments, folks like Matt Mahan and Antonio Villaraigosa, got killed.
And Katie Porter. Like people who ran on issues and ideas, and here's what I've done to fix homelessness or build housing. They weren't lashing Trump constantly, and they didn't get out of single digits. You can see on the screen right there.
I think all of this is going to matter in 28, but like we're talking about the lowest consumer confidence ratings that the University of Michigan has ever polled. Basically, if you're standing on the other side of that, that's the main thing you need at this point.
Thank you guys so much for being with us for the last 4 hours of coverage here. It's been a really interesting night and a privilege to be able to witness history with all of you at home. We still don't know who won here in California. It could take us 3 weeks to count the votes, but we'll be with you every step of the way here on The Story Is. I'm Alex Michelson in Los Angeles. Polo Sandoval picks up our coverage right after this.
Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition of CNN Newsroom. I'm Polo Sandoval live in New York, midnight in California, and that is where it is still election night. And results are coming in at this hour, and this after Americans in 6 states voted in key primary elections. New Jersey, South Dakota, Montana, New Mexico, Iowa, and of course, California. They all held their votes ahead of the November midterms for key gubernatorial, Senate, and House seats. The voting, that is the vote counting itself, that is still underway right now in California, where all eyes are on both the state governor's race and the race for LA mayor. The very latest projections right now, they show a crowded ballot of 61 names in the governor's primary, narrowing down to just a few candidates at the head of the pack. Trump-backed Republican and former Fox News host Steve Hilton, Democrat Xavier Becerra, who actually has formerly served as California's Attorney General and as a member of the Biden cabinet. And then there's billionaire Tom Steyer, also a Democrat. Earlier, while speaking to crowds of supporters, the two leading candidates, they shared their prospective visions for the state's future. Listen to this.
California is America on fast forward. It's gleaming spotlights on the better angels of a more perfect union. A preview of an America, not just for the privileged or the partisans, but for all the people, by the people. An economic engine so powerful, so diverse, with more jobs, more capital, more R&D, more GDP. We lift up the entire nation. We are America's center tent pole.
It's time for positive, practical things. I'm fighting for working people in California so that you can keep more of what you earn. The best way to put money in people's pockets is to take less out of it in the first place. And that's what I'll do as your governor. Your first 100 grand tax-free. Simple, practical things to make life less of a struggle.
And votes are still being counted in the Los Angeles mayoral race, and CNN projecting incumbent Karen Bass will be advancing to the general election come November. She has secured at least 36.5% of the votes, putting her in the top spot so far. Her opponent, not yet confirmed, but early results are showing that ex-reality TV star Spencer Pratt is just behind her, and he's also going to be competing with City Council member Nithya Raman, who's currently in third. Mayor Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt already addressed some of their supporters earlier.
I don't care where you're from, when you got here, or why you're here. You are an Angelino, and we are going to fight for you, and we are going to protect you. We want a city where you can go out and walk at night because the street lights are on. And we got 60,000 of those street lights that are being turned on right now, and sidewalks that are going to be fixed because we're going to fix our infrastructure.
The list of failures across the city. There's people that just want the potholes fixed. Mayor Bass has allowed the city to be covered in potholes. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have lights. So on the basic level, there's people that care about that. Then there's the moms who want to be able to go to the parks and not see anybody shooting up fentanyl with their pants off. I was in the Valley yesterday, a beautiful Persian restaurant, and the lovely owner said, Spencer, they have naked drug addicts in front of the kids when we're trying to have food at the restaurant. This is across the city.
All right, let's go live to the man who needs no caffeine to work this late hour. Just the ability to track a couple of high-stakes elections. Harry Enten joining us, our chief data analyst. Harry, I wonder if we could start with the LA mayor's race. At this point, obviously, you've shown us some of the numbers right now. It's still too soon for Spencer Pratt to claim a victory.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. You know, we obviously have already projected that Karen Bass, the current mayor, will advance to the November election. The question is, who does she face off, right? And yes, it's a nonpartisan, but Spencer Pratt, of course, backed by Republicans. Nithya Raman is a Democrat, along with Karen Bass. And you say to yourself, wait a minute, Karen Bass has got about 37% of the vote, 36.8. Spencer Pratt, 29.2% of the vote. And then you say, hey, Nithya Raman's way back here at 21.4%. She can't catch Spencer Pratt, but there's only 51% of the vote in. And what we know is that based upon the partisan registration and historical trends as well, those late ballots tend to lean more Democratic. Therefore, that's the reason why we can't yet project who's going to be in that second spot. And I will also note that in the latest batch that I was looking at, Raman has actually been catching up to Pratt. So there is still a long way to go, and I will note that Karen Bass, if you look at the general election polling, if she in fact faces Pratt, stands a much better chance of winning against him than against Nithya Raman, so maybe she's hoping that Pratt holds on. Now, of course, there's also the gubernatorial race, and this tells you everything you need to know. Right now, it's the top two advance. We don't know who it's going to be. We got Steve Hilton at 27.6, Javier Becerra at 25.5, Hilton a Republican, Becerra a Democrat. The question is, can Tom Steyer, who's right now at 19.6% of the vote, catch either Becerra or Hilton? Again, the trends we spoke about in Los Angeles, those late ballots, historically speaking, they're Democratic. Can, in fact, Steyer could catch Becerra, but more likely what I would expect is Hilton's number will start to drop, Steyer's number will go up. But for right now, the thing that you really have to like if you're Javier Becerra is the San Francisco Bay Area, right around here. That's where Tom Steyer is from, Polo. That is where Tom Steyer is from. But look at all this navy blue. There's not very much of it at all. In fact, it's Columbia blue for Javier Becerra. So at this point, what we're looking at is we're looking at a gubernatorial race that at this point is still too early to call, but right now, if there's anyone I really like to be, it's Javier Becerra. We'll have to wait and see because, again, what are we talking about? Only 54% of the vote in, and you know that these votes can go on and on and on. And historically speaking, who's leading on election night doesn't actually end up necessarily in the top two, Polo.
We very well may see a Steyer surprise into the night, or as you point out, in the coming days. So happy that you're with us, Harry Enten, to dive through all those numbers. We'll check back with you again in a bit. We do want to go now to Melanie Mason. She's the California bureau chief for Politico. She joins me live from Sacramento. Melanie, it's also great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me.
I wonder if we could start with the LA mayor's race and that possible scenario that Harry just laid out. For Karen Bass, would that be a worst case scenario if she were to end up eventually running against her fellow Democrat?
Yeah, I think there would be some real whiplash for the mayor in that she's probably quite pleased with where she's finished tonight. But I do think that she's looking at Nithya Raman perhaps being able to overtake Spencer Pratt. I mean, she still has a ways to go, but as Harry pointed out, the trend is what Nithya would like to be seen. And then that's going to be a very tough head-to-head matchup for Mayor Bass in November, because in a Democratic city like Los Angeles, liberal voters probably, if they're unhappy with Karen Bass, they could go over to Councilmember Raman. They're less likely to go over to Spencer Pratt. And so I think that is why Mayor Bass probably would have rather run against Spencer Pratt. She would like to see people kick into their partisan polarization. And with Raman, it's a little bit more of a wild card.
Yeah, I mean, the differences couldn't be any more starker. You have a Trump-supported Republican, or does she face a fellow Democrat who's a progressive? We'll certainly be watching that. Melanie, let's shift gears now. Let's look at the state. What does the first night of voter data tell you when it comes to the California governor's race?
Well, I think that it is a fair conclusion to say that this is a good night for Xavier Becerra. I mean, he started off strong, and I think that he is likely to sort of remain in that position. And even if the vote share for Steve Hilton does go down, I think it is pretty difficult for Steyer to be able to catch up. He will really need to see an overwhelming shift in these late mail votes. So, look, I think if you're Xavier Becerra, much like Karen Bass in Los Angeles, you want to run against a Republican in November. You want Democratic voters to coalesce behind you. And I think that he probably feels like if he ends up emerging with Steve Hilton, that he probably doesn't have to have a particularly stressful summer or fall.
Let's discuss one more possible scenario here, which appears to be a likely one. If Republican Stephen Hilton advances to the general, in your view, what does he need to do in order to stand a chance? I mean, you're talking about a blue state dominated by registered Democrats.
Look, Steve Hilton's message is pretty compelling, right? I mean, he is telling Californians that after 16 years of Democratic dominance, maybe it is time for a change. And we know from polling that Californians are not happy with the direction that the state is going in. I mean, it is definitely underwater when it comes to how favorable they see the direction of the state. But at the same time, it is a very Democratic state. What we're going to see in November is a very nationalized election. There's going to be all this talk about who has control of the House, who has control of the Senate. And I think when everybody sees politics in these national terms, as opposed to where the state is, that's going to make it very difficult for Hilton.
And for Becerra himself, I mean, how does he present himself to voters moving forward as well, especially to tap into some of those concerns about public safety, perhaps certainly about affordability right now?
Yeah, I mean, the tricky needle that Becerra has tried to thread, and he will have to continue to do so, is to say, you know, look, I know that people are dissatisfied and that he wants to be able to bring some change, but not too much change, because he doesn't want to distance himself from the incumbent governor, Gavin Newsom. And that's because Newsom himself still remains popular in this state. So we've seen him kind of do this dance where he'll acknowledge that people are frustrated about affordability or about homelessness, but he won't say anything about what he would do that's too different from what Governor Newsom would do, with a few exceptions. And so I think he's going to kind of continue to hug Newsom fairly closely, because, again, when you're looking at this Democratic state, most of the Democratic voters in the state are pretty happy with Governor Newsom right now.
And I'm also curious about the lessons of tonight thus far. Again, those numbers are still coming in. Votes are still being counted. For Democrats, when they see the performance of Republicans in California tonight, I mean, is this sort of a warning shot across the bow?
Look, I think that Democrats absolutely need to be doing some soul searching about this election cycle. I think in particular the fact that this governor's race was as unsettled as it was and as unclear for so long. But at the same time, I wouldn't over-index on the stronger numbers that we're seeing from Republicans tonight. That's something that we expected. We knew that early votes coming in were going to lean more Republican, and primary voters do tend to be more conservative than general. But yes, I think Democrats probably, if they're going to take a step back, look at the candidate quality that they're fielding for some of these races, I think that maybe there's some soul searching to do, but I think maybe they'll be so happy with the idea of a D versus R matchup that maybe they'll just overlook it.
Melanie Mason is always grateful for your reporting, and we'll continue to look out for that reporting in the hours and perhaps even days or weeks ahead as these votes are counted. Thanks, Melanie. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, we are also following some key primary races across the country. CNN is now projecting that U.S. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson, she will win the Republican nomination for Iowa Senate seat currently held by outgoing Senator Joni Ernst. Hinson cruised to victory thanks in part to endorsements from President Donald Trump and Ernst herself.
To my fabulous friend, Senator Ernst, She is leaving behind some pretty big combat boots to fill, but like I've told her and Iowans across the state, she has spent the last 12 years sending Washington's fattest hogs running for the hills. And when I pick up this baton in November, you all have my word, the squealing's not going to stop. It's only going to get louder.
And Hinson will be advancing to the general election in November and face Democrat Josh Turek. CNN is now projecting that he will defeat Zach Wahls to win the Democratic nomination and also a chance to flip one of Iowa's Senate seats. CNN's Jeff Zeleny has the very latest from Des Moines.
The field is now set for another key U.S. Senate contest with Democrat Josh Turek easily defeating State Senator Zach Wahls. Now, Iowa is going to be one of the places that is going to be key in this midterm election battle playing out over the next 5 months. The race is now on to fill the seat of retiring Senator Joni Ernst. Now, it has been a very long time since Iowa has sent a Democrat to the U.S. Senate. In fact, not since 2008 when Senator Tom Harkin won re-election. But Tom Harkin endorsed Josh Turek, a Paralympian, a two-time gold medal-winning athlete on the men's wheelchair basketball team, a state representative as well. Josh Turek used the power of his disability to turn into a political strength, and he said that's what he will fight for all Iowans.
We have enough millionaires in D.C. looking out for billionaires. We need real people in Washington who have felt the consequences of a broken system, because when you have gone through real struggle, you will have a different level of empathy and a different level of fight. And this is what we need in D.C., fighters for the people, and that is what I will be in the United States Senate.
Now, Turek will be facing Ashley Hinson, a Republican member of Congress from Northeast Iowa. This is going to be one of the most closely watched Senate races in the country. Democrats, of course, need to pick up 4 seats and hold all of their existing ones if they hope to succeed in the uphill battle to win control of the Senate. But Republicans are already concerned about the economic headwinds that they are facing here in Iowa and have committed to spend about $30 million for Hinson. This race will be certainly viewed in a different light come Wednesday morning when more of a focus is on it. But there is no doubt Josh Turek, through the power of his story, is going to be a key rising star, at least for now. The question, can Iowa still send a Democrat to Washington? Of course, it's a state that President Trump won 3 times, but Barack Obama also won this state twice. So there is no doubt all eyes will be on Iowa between now and November. Jeff Zeleny, CNN, Des Moines.
And CNN election night coverage continues in a moment. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. 6 states, they held election primaries on Tuesday night, including New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota, and of course the crucial state of Iowa. CNN's chief data analyst Harry Enton been monitoring those election results as well. Harry's with me again, joining me from the magic wall.
Where else would I be? Where else would I be,
Of course.
Polo?
Where else would somebody be at
stuck to this
3:30 in the
wall.
morning?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
following the election results behind you, what do they show?
Yeah, okay. You know, we were talking about California at the top of the hour. Now we're going to the center of the country, Iowa. Of course, that's where any presidential contest begins, right? The Iowa caucuses, at least on the Republican side. And that, of course, is where Donald Trump's journey to being president of the United States began all the way back in 2016. He lost the Iowa caucuses. It was a little bit of a Waterloo for him. And tonight, or I should say last night in Iowa, it was a bit of a Waterloo again. Why do I say that? Because Zach Lane, who is our projected winner in the great state of Iowa, was in fact not endorsed by Donald Trump. Donald Trump endorsed Randy Feenstra, who in fact, if you can see it on your screen, lost. Donald Trump, who has basically been invincible in Republican primaries, went down in defeat. That is, his candidate went down in defeat. And you can see it here. The margin is really quite small. It's only a little bit less than 2,000 votes. Now, what's really interesting, Polo, is this. I went on the Iowa Secretary of State's website, and what's really interesting is Donald Trump made an endorsement late in this race. But did it impact, did it in fact help Feenstra? Actually, what we see is that on Election Day, the voters who voted on Election Day, 73,000 of them or so went for Zach Lane. That is the candidate that Trump did not endorse. The candidate that he did endorse, Randy Feenstra, got about 68,000. Ergo, Feenstra did worse on Election Day after Trump had endorsed him. He'd actually won the absentee vote, but yet he lost on Election Day despite Trump's endorsement. Now, this is one of the key nuggets that is taken out of Iowa, but it's not the only one, because if we reset our screen here and we go to the Iowa Democratic Senate race, this is the other race that I was really interested in watching. Why is that? Because more middle-of-the-road Democrats, those in Washington, D.C., really wanted Josh Turek to be the nominee against Zach Walz, who in fact was much more progressive and went against Chuck Schumer, of course, the Democratic leader in the Senate. But look at what happened here. Josh Turek actually won this race rather convincingly. I mean, he is Columbia blue, and this entire map here basically is Columbia blue. That is a 25-point win. And why is that so important? It is so important for this reason. If you look at rural areas, and there are a lot of them in Iowa, despite the fact that Iowa has not elected a Democrat to the Senate since 2008, Donald Trump's approval rating, according to Fox News, has dropped by, guess this, 34 points among rural voters since March of 2025. So maybe you're looking at these results where Democrats have actually gotten the candidate they want, at least Washington, D.C. Democrats, and you say, hey, Donald Trump is really struggling among rural voters. Maybe this will be the first time since 2000 in which Iowa elects a Democrat, and that would be very key on the road to getting back a Senate majority, Polo.
Harry Enten, really appreciate you laying all that out, my friend.
I try.
Let's move on now to the acting U.S. Attorney General. He says that the plan for a $1.8 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund at the Justice Department, that those plans are not moving forward. Todd Blanche made that announcement while testifying before the House Appropriations Committee on Tuesday. The fund was originally part of a settlement between the IRS and President Trump, members of the Trump family, as well as their businesses. And it faced bipartisan pushback and as well as some criticism in recent weeks. The second part of the settlement, it agreed, the actual settlement itself, at least the second part, that stands, which bars the IRS from bringing claims against the president and those included for past tax issues. But that remains a hot-button issue as well.
Part of the settlement included the second order that you just held up.
Right.
And that is still, nothing has changed with that.
As part of the settlement, which you've said, which is this immunity for the president and his family and his business, etc. That stands. Thank you for
It's not immunity, ma'am. It's
thank you.
It's a promise.
Thank you. It's immunity.
It's not immunity. It's not immunity. Okay, so it's not immunity. What it says is like any time the IRS settles with an individual taxpayer or another company as part of the settlement, it's standard. It's typical to get rid of past ongoing audits. It's not a forward-looking document. It's nothing that gives any sort of immunity in the future to the president or his family or his organizations.
And Democrats as well as Republicans alike, they are blasting President Trump's choice to name Bill Pulte as the acting director of national intelligence. Pulte will be replacing Tulsi Gabbard, who announced last month that she would resign. Pulte is widely seen as a Trump loyalist with a record of going after many of the president's perceived political enemies. But Trump's new intelligence chief does not have any demonstrated experience with national security or in the intelligence community. And this is a red flag for some lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Pulte's experience in the housing agencies was only to weaponize them and politicize them.
You're putting in a person whose qualification is that he's blindly loyal to Trump.
I don't know of any national security experience he has.
I see no evidence of any qualifications for that job.
Mr. Pulte has absolutely no intelligence background. He has no national security background. The law was written to prevent this kind of appointment. Our intelligence work has always been bipartisan. Senator, are we going to finally hit the gag reflex? I hope.
Joining us now from Los Angeles is Georgia Kernel. She's a political science professor at UCLA. Georgia, great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, nice to be here.
Let's actually stay on that last topic right now and President Trump's decision for the Director of National Intelligence. I mean, you know, and you've seen the president's current approval numbers, they continue to plummet. Given the criticism that we've just heard from both sides of the aisle, I mean, wouldn't this selection from the president likely to do more harm than good?
It's hard to say. I mean, most of his selections have had
unanimous support among Republicans, and we've always seen just the opposite among Democrats. So we're really going to have to see, does this pan out? Are Republicans going to stay divided? I'm not sure if Republicans are responding to the increasing coverage of his dwindling polls, or if they're actually changing their opinion. But I'm not sure at this point what we'll see.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. There's a big question on what we may see. Now, in terms of what we did see on Tuesday, and the head of the DOJ announcing that they were essentially abandoning those efforts for this so-called anti-weaponization fund. I'm curious what you make of the president's retreat on that effort, and do you think we've seen the last of it?
I'm not sure if this will be the last of it. I mean, at this point, I think he's trying to shut down any media coverage whatsoever of that. And so as much as he can change the discussion to anything else, I think that's what he's trying to do.
I'm wondering if we could perhaps shift gears also to see some of the elections and some of the numbers that you've seen coming in as well. Perhaps in California, other parts of the country as well. I'm just curious what you make of some of the early numbers that have come in.
Yeah, so in California, there's the big gubernatorial and then the big LA mayor race right now. And so in both those cases, we've got one Republican and two Democrats that really are vying for those top two positions. So California has a top two primary, which is really different than what we have in most other states. Alaska has a top four, but for the most part, we see Democrats competing against Republicans. And here we could see two Democrats facing off. At one point, we thought there was a chance we might even see two Republicans facing off. That's clearly not going to be the case. In the mayoral election, I saw that the LA Times has now said that Karen Bass has indeed made it to the November 3rd election, assuming she does not get 50%. And who she'll be facing off against is still remains to be seen. And in the gubernatorial race, I think it's too soon to know who those top two candidates will be.
Georgia, I'm also just fascinated by how the Republican candidates may campaign forward should they move on into November. I mean, these are candidates that, for the most part, or at least many of them, have been supported by President Trump. And they're running in jurisdictions and districts and states that may be fairly, with many independents, fairly, but many swing districts as well. So just how do candidates, like, for example, Spencer Pratt at the local level or Steve Hilton when it comes to the state gubernatorial race, sort of distance themselves from a president with plummeting approval numbers?
Yeah, I mean, there's some independents, but for the most part, California and LA is made up of Democrats. And so barring really something devastating happening to the Democratic candidate, if Pratt and Hilton do advance, then they are very unlikely to win in November. That being said, they might their aspirations might not just be to win that election, but also to increase their name recognition for other races and also to get issues on the ballot. So let's say that it is Pratt versus Bass, then that will change what the discussion is, what the dynamic is in the race and the campaign leading up to the mayoral election. Be very different than if Rahman makes it in the mayoral race. There will also just be less money spent because if, in fact, it is a Democrat versus a Republican in either the gubernatorial or the mayoral election, the Democrats are so favored to win that they won't have to spend as much money. But if it's a Democrat versus a Democrat, we'll actually see a lot more money spent. And so I think many Democratic voters really wanted to vote for the Democrat that would, they didn't want to see two Democrats go on because they knew that would increase so much spending, and perhaps they see that as wasteful spending.
And that's still very much a possibility until you see those final numbers, especially in the Golden State. Just
it looks
the
most
overall.
Likely.
Right.
I would say it's most likely.
Sure. Okay. Now, in terms of just how you would characterize the election in California, obviously much of it had been seen as sort of an election of change. What do you think that the electorate will be looking forward to in the coming months leading up to the actual midterms?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We saw high turnout today. So or I guess now yesterday, higher turnout than we've had especially in these midterm primary elections, and then we've seen in a while. So I think that means that both Republicans and Democrats are ready to go to the polls, and I expect that will pan out and also be the case in November. In November, there won't be these tight elections, though, probably, if indeed we do have one Republican and one Democrat going on in the gubernatorial and the mayoral elections. We won't have such a tight race, most likely there, but we will, of course, have a lot of tight races in other midterms. And so I think that probably one of the things I've noticed the most today is just this high turnout may suggest that people are really paying attention.
Not just there, but really all across the country with stakes high. Georgia Colonel, thank you so much for letting us tap into your expertise tonight. And thank you so much for staying up late for us.
Sure.
And our coverage continues in a moment. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back. We do want to take a quick moment to check in on the results for California's key primary elections so far. A reminder, there are still plenty of votes that are left to count in the race for governor, but the very latest data now showing that two candidates seem to be emerging. You have Republican Steve Hilton coming with a little under 28% of the vote. Javier Becerra already celebrating, though still Tom Steyer potentially within striking distance as well. Which one of these three men will advance to the midterms? Of course, there's a big question there. And votes are also still being counted in Los Angeles mayoral election. And CNN is now projecting that incumbent Karen Bass will, in fact, advance to the general election in November. Her opponent, not yet confirmed, but early results are showing that ex-reality TV star Spencer Pratt is just behind her, with City Council member Nithya Raman is currently in third. And we are back with CNN special coverage of Election Night in America. 6 states held their primaries, including California, we just mentioned, New Jersey, and then, of course, Iowa. Let's go back to CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, who's been closely watching all of those results behind you. It looks like we want to start in Los Angeles this time, Harry.
Yeah, we want to start in Los Angeles. You know, I like to go out to the West Coast. It's the East Coast here, but it's the West Coast out there. And why do I want to start in Los Angeles, Paul? The reason I want to start in Los Angeles is because I've been following this, and every single time we get a little bit more vote, well, not surprisingly, the result changes, but more than that, the result gets tighter for that final spot to face Karen Bass in the fall. Now, what are we talking about here? Now we got 53% of the voting. Karen Bass, as we said, has already advanced. Now, Spencer Pratt, this is a nonpartisan primary, but he was backed primarily by Republicans, right? He's at 29.1% of the vote. Then you get Nithya Raman, who's another Democrat, who's at 21.6%. Now the gap between them, if I'm doing my math correctly, at this hour at 3:40 in the East, it's now 7.5 points. Now, why is that notable? Because when I started off, at least a little bit, a few hours ago, the margin between Pratt and Raman was not 7.5 points, it was 10 points. In other words, the margin is shrinking. And this is what we would have expected based upon historical trends and also based upon who seemed to be returning the ballots later on, and therefore the votes getting counted later on. That is, they tend to lean more Democratic. So despite the fact that right now Pratt is second behind Bass, we are seeing Raman close the gap between herself and Pratt. And it honestly would not surprise me that when all the votes are counted, and we still got 47% of the vote to still count with 53% of the vote in, it would not surprise me if, in fact, Raman overtook Pratt. And that might be bad news for Karen Bass, because looking ahead to the general election polls, Bass has done considerably better against Pratt than Raman. A Raman-Bass race might be a very tight one. But that is not the only race that I'm watching out in California. Look, obviously, we've been talking about the gubernatorial matchup, and the top two advanced there. And right now, it's Hilton and Becerra, with Steyer back at 19.6%. Now, we've been getting more of the vote in. Now we're up to what? We are up to 55% of the vote in. But again, the same trends that we saw, that we've been seeing in the LA mayor, would not surprise me if we see in the California gubernatorial race as well. The later ballots have tended to be, historically speaking, more Democratic leaning. That means that probably Javier Becerra right now in your Columbia blue at 25.5% is in pretty good position. I think the question is, can Tom Steyer close with more Democratic ballots later on? We're just going to have to wait and see. But right now it's Hilton and Becerra, 1 and 2. Steyer, the odd man out. But hey, we still got 45% of the votes still to count, Polo. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, how narrow can that gap actually get, as you point out? Harry Ensign, thank you so much. We'll keep checking back with you, my friend. Let's go now to Sarah Sadhwani, who's a political science professor at Pomona College and also a democracy fellow at Harvard University Kennedy School. She joins me live from Los Angeles. It is wonderful to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sarah, you just heard some of the latest numbers right now from Harry Ensign, not just at the governor's race, but also when it comes to the city of Los Angeles. I'm just curious what your takeaway is right now, as Karen Bass certainly watching very closely who her opponent will end up being in just a few months' time.
Karen Bass definitely looked happy tonight, claiming what seemed to be a victory because she's going to make it to the runoff. But I think we need to also put this into some context. It's quite rare for a sitting incumbent to not be able to win at this stage. These local elections in Los Angeles can be won at the primary stage if a candidate can achieve 50+1% of the vote tally. For an incumbent to not be able to do that is also really problematic. Karen Bass has suffered from a lack of confidence of voters across Los Angeles. And I think what's notable for Spencer Pratt, I mean, you noted that he is largely associated with the Republican Party, but there's only 300,000 registered Republicans in the city of Los Angeles. So he is clearly picking up Democrats and independents as a part of his support as well. I think you're absolutely right. Much will be seen what happens in the coming hours and days. It's highly likely that those ballots still coming in are going to be coming from not just Democrats, but even from the left of Democrats, which likely could be Nithya Raman supporters.
And if in the event that we do see a Bass-Pratt election, or runoff, I should say, in a few months' time, how would Pratt even be able to continue to stay on the same message that he has been really trying to focus on leading up to Tuesday's election?
Spencer Pratt has been incredibly successful at running a campaign that's really outing the establishment, which includes both Karen Bass and Nithya Raman, sitting members of the city council and the mayor, and really outing the problems that the city of Los Angeles has. So to the extent that he can continue to do that, to name in plain terms the real problems that the city faces around homelessness, around affordability, that would play very well for Spencer Pratt, but he's going to have to also play to the center a little bit. He's been somewhat Trumpian in his approach with the bombastic kind of language, the AI-generated ads that have caught a whole lot of attention. But if he actually wants to win, he's going to have to show voters that he can do more than just run a flashy campaign, but that they can trust him to actually govern. Because at the end of the day, what California voters and Los Angeles voters in particular want to see are results.
I'm wondering if in the last minute I have with you, Sarah, what are your thoughts on the state's race for governor? What will you be looking at specifically in the coming hours and days?
Much like the mayor's race, it's a big question whether or not Tom Steyer can close that gap as more ballots come in and get counted. Let's not forget, here in California, we have a system that allows people to vote on election day by mail. So if you put your ballot in the mail today, it gets postmarked today. It has several days before it arrives at the vote center and actually gets opened and counted. So a lot can change over the course of the next several days and even week, and we've definitely seen that happen previously. It would be quite a coup for Democrats if they're able to get 2 Democrats past this primary election, because previously there was a lot of talk about maybe 2 Republicans advancing after the primary, and that would be a worst case scenario for a very blue state like California.
That's Sarah Sadhwani joining us live from Los Angeles, where the counting continues. Sarah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. There's also a new Supreme Court ruling that will be allowing Alabama to use a congressional map that will benefit Republicans in this year's midterm elections. The ruling on Tuesday, it allows the state to cut one of 2 House districts represented by a black member of Congress who is also a Democrat. The high court decision, it comes despite the fact that Alabama has already held congressional primaries. The Alabama case, it is the latest emergency order tied to the Supreme Court's April decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act.
So heading into tonight, Alabama had a map where of the 7 congressional districts in Alabama, 2 of those had been drawn to be majority black Democrat-leaning districts. However, now as a result of this decision, that's going to go down to 1. And this is all based off of the Louisiana Supreme Court opinion that came down in late April. In that opinion, the U.S. Supreme Court said the states can essentially draw congressional lines for whatever political reasons they want. They cannot, however, consider race either way in drawing those lines. So the state of Alabama took that opinion and said, okay, we now want to undraw one of those majority black districts and go from 2 down to 1. And in tonight's opinion, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 split, the 6 conservatives in the majority, the 3 liberals in the dissent, said, it's okay, Alabama, you can go ahead and do that. So the net out of the end of this is that Alabama will go from 2 majority black Democratic-leaning districts down to 1.
That's CNN legal analyst Elie Honig with that analysis, and we'll be back in a moment. Returning now to California's primaries, where the crowded race for governor is starting to narrow down. That state, it runs a so-called jungle primary where the top 2 vote getters out of a field of 61 people on the ballot, where the top 2 get to advance to the November general election regardless of their party. And with over half of the votes already counted, 2 candidates appear to be rising to the top. You see former Fox News host and Trump-backed Republican Steve Hilton, of course, followed by former Biden cabinet administration member and also California's former Attorney General Xavier Becerra as well. Not too late, though, for Tom Steyer. The key question, can Tom Steyer narrow that gap? And the Los Angeles mayoral race also has at least one decision. CNN projecting that Mayor Karen Bass will be advancing to the general election in November. And it's still too early to know who she'll be facing. So far, Spencer Pratt, a former reality show star and outspoken critic of the mayor, is second. City Councilwoman Nithya Raman is in third. Mayor Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt address their supporters separately.
I don't care where you're from, when you got here, or why you're here. You are an Angelino, and we are going to fight for you, and we are going to protect you. We want a city where you can go out and walk at night because the street lights are on. And we got 60,000 of those street lights that are being turned on right now, and sidewalks that are going to be fixed because we're going to fix our infrastructure.
The list of failures across the city. There's people that just want the potholes fixed. Mayor Bass has allowed the city to be covered in potholes. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have lights. So on the basic level, there's people that care about that. Then there's the moms who want to be able to go to the parks and not see anybody shooting up fentanyl with their pants off. I was in the Valley yesterday, a beautiful Persian restaurant, and the lovely owner said, Spencer, they have naked drug addicts in front of the kids when we're trying to have food at the restaurant. This is across the city.
And in other news, CBS News has fired veteran 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley. CNN's Brian Stelter with more on that.
Yeah, this is like an underwater earthquake at CBS News. It's not going to be visible on TV right away, but this is bound to have many ripple effects and maybe a legal battle. Scott Pelley has been a 60 Minutes correspondent for more than 2 decades. He was fired by CBS News management one day after he erupted at a staff meeting and said that his current bosses are not qualified for their jobs. Pelley said that CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss is, quote, murdering 60 Minutes by firing veteran staffers and hiring a former tech reporter named Nick Bilton to run the show. Pelley was called in for a meeting with Bilton and Weiss. It's unclear what happened in the meeting, but a few hours later, Pelley received a termination letter, and here's part of what it says. This letter from Bilton says, quote, "You hijacked my first meeting with staff to disparage me, my qualifications, and my intentions with remarkable incivility and contempt." Bilton says he tried to find a way forward, but you made clear you're not interested in such a path. The letter says Pelley has been terminated for cause, which means there will probably be a legal battle. Pelley might lawyer up and try to sue CBS. We'll see what happens. This is incredibly unusual to see a blow-up like this at a major network, with Pelley leaving and concerns about political clouds hovering over CBS News. Bari Weiss and her allies, they say they're trying to move 60 Minutes into the digital age, trying to reinvent the show that's been an institution on television. But Pelley and others are not going quietly.
I want to thank you so much for watching our special coverage. I'm Paul Sandoval in New York. I'll join you again in a few moments here on CNN Newsroom. Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining me. I'm Polo Sandoval, and this is CNN Newsroom. At this hour, we are tracking early results from several key primary elections here in the United States. New Jersey, South Dakota, Montana, New Mexico, Iowa, and of course, California. They all held votes ahead of the November midterm for gubernatorial Senate and House seats. California's races, they are some of the most watched. With about 55% of the votes in, Trump-backed Republican Steve Hilton and Democrat Javier Becerra are neck and neck. The Los Angeles mayoral race is also grabbing some attention throughout the country. CNN projecting that incumbent Karen Bass will be advancing to the general election in November as she hopes to secure a second term. Bass says that she is committed to addressing the city's most dire problems.
We're going to build a city where parents and kids do not have to navigate tents, because in the nation's second largest city, there should never be anybody that is sleeping on our streets.
And early results are showing that ex-reality TV star Spencer Pratt is just behind her. He spoke to some of his supporters.
This idea that I don't represent Democrats and Republicans and independents, anyone that's just a Los Angeles citizen that wants basic quality of life, I'll be able to show that in 5 months. I didn't know I'd be here tonight, but it's obviously God's plan, and I'm going to go all the way, and I'm going to show everybody that I'm their mayor.
So that's the latest in the race to lead America's second largest city. Let's go back now to California's governor's race. CNN's Arlette Saenz is tracking that from Javier Becerra's headquarters in Los Angeles.
California voters will need to wait a little bit longer to learn which two candidates will face off in the governor's race in November, and whether it will be a Democrat versus Democrat or a Democrat versus a Republican. No candidate was able to declare victory on Tuesday night in this incredibly crowded field, but there were two candidates who led the pack in the early vote results. That included Democrat Javier Becerra, who had surged in recent months in this campaign to really be at the top or near the top of this pack of candidates. And the other was Republican Steve Hilton, who is running with the backing of President Donald Trump. Both men spoke to their supporters on Tuesday evening, saying that they were prepared for the fight in November.
We will not be bought, we will not be bullied, and we are never backing down.
Change is coming to California, and it's long overdue.
One other candidate to keep an eye on will be the progressive candidate, Tom Steyer. He is a billionaire who poured roughly $200 million of his personal fortune into this campaign, but he has really run with a populist message. Steyer told his supporters on Tuesday night that they will need to be patient as the results continue to come in. California historically is very slow in their vote counting. Part of that is due to the size of the state, and also the fact that there is universal mail-in ballot, allowing voters to submit their ballots up until Election Day. So all of the campaigns have been preparing for the possibility that this vote count could extend for some time, potentially days or even well into the week, as California voters wait to hear which two candidates will make it into this general election matchup. Arlette Saenz, CNN, Los Angeles.
And in Los Angeles, it is 1 a.m. and those numbers, those ballots are still getting counted. Let's head now to get the latest on all of the races across the board. Let's start with CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton, harnessing the power of his magic wall to start off with the race for LA's mayor. Take it away.
Yeah, I'm harnessing that power, and as we have watched, Paula, and we've been together now for a little bit over an hour. I've been at the Magic Wall since 1 a.m. here in the East, 10 p.m. out in the West. We have seen the votes getting counted, and what's very interesting, we're up to 55% of the vote now in for L.A. mayor, 45% still to go. Now, obviously, we've mentioned Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor. She's advanced to the November general election, to the runoff, 36% of the vote. Now, Spencer Pratt and Anthea Rahman, Pratt, although it's a nonpartisan ballot, supported by mostly Republicans, has been ahead the entire night. But Rahman, another Democrat like Bass, has been closing the gap. The gap right now stands at a little bit less than 8 points. Now, historically speaking, and based upon what we know of the remaining ballots, there's a reason why we haven't projected who gets the second spot. That is, traditionally, historically speaking, those later ballot returns have been friendlier to Democrats, and so far we have, in fact, seen Rahman closing that gap. Will she be able to close a little bit less than an 8-point gap as we get on to today, tomorrow, et cetera, as those late ballots arrive? We'll just have to wait and see. But I can tell you that Karen Bass would much rather face Spencer Pratt based upon the general election polling or the runoff polling than she would Anthea Rahman, because she can make a much more clear Democrat versus Republican case if it's in fact Spencer Pratt who makes the general election. Now, beyond L.A. mayor, look, obviously we're talking about the California gubernatorial race. The key question here is who are going to be the two who advance. Throughout the evening, it's been Steve Hilton and Javier Becerra, Republican, Democrat, 1 and 2. But the third man in the race, is he the odd man out, or will he surge as more ballots get counted? Is Tom Steyer, the progressive candidate. As you mentioned, we've been getting more of the vote, and we're now up to 56% of the vote. Now, again, just like we see for that mayoral race in Los Angeles, historically speaking, statewide, the later ballots tend to be more Democratic. So Javier Becerra probably in pretty decent shape, but we'll just have to wait and see. But Tom Steyer could get a boost, and maybe you do a nice switcheroo and you flip Steyer and Hilton. But I will note, if you're Javier Becerra, one thing you absolutely have to love is the San Francisco area, which is where Tom Steyer lives right now, is from. That is much more Columbia blue for Javier Becerra than it is navy blue for Tom Steyer. One little last thing that I will note, my dear friend, is this. I am very interested, if we go down here, let's go. We're going to go to the San Francisco area. Why is that? Because this is Nancy Pelosi's seat. She is retiring after a long career in Congress, and two interesting nuggets from there. Number one, the candidate she endorsed, Connie Chan, is actually running second right now. Again, it's top to advance, but running second. And more than that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, her former chief of staff, look at this, despite spending so much running a very distant third to Scott Wiener. I will note AOC didn't endorse him, and maybe he really could have used it. Polo?
Yeah, every time we check in with you, Harry, it seems that the percentage of votes in does seem to go up. So a reminder that this is an ongoing situation happening on the West Coast. So we're so happy that you're up with us tonight, through the morning, I should say, as we continue to follow this. There's no rest for the weary or the wise, Harry Enten.
I'll see you a little bit later.
Thank you for your analysis, as always. See you in a bit. All right, we still have a lot more to get to, especially as we continue to see the situation out west. We are following key primary races in other parts of the country. CNN is now projecting U.S. Congresswoman Ashley Hinson will be winning the Republican nomination for Iowa's Senate seat, currently held by outgoing Senator Joni Ernst. Hinson cruised to victory thanks in part to an endorsement from President Donald Trump and also from Ernst herself.
To my fabulous friend, Senator Ernst. She is leaving behind some pretty big combat boots to fill, but like I've told her and Iowans across the state, she has spent the last 12 years sending Washington's fattest hogs running for the hills. And when I pick up this baton in November, you all have my word, the squealing's not going to stop, it's only going to get louder.
Hinson will advance to the general election in November and also face Democrat Josh Turek. CNN is projecting that he will defeat Zach Walz to win the Democratic nomination and a chance to help flip one of Iowa's Senate seats.
This campaign has been about fighting for the middle class, working families, rural communities, small family farms, and working with anyone to address rising costs, stagnant incomes, and out-of-control corruption in D.C. Iowans all over this state have heard our message and felt hope that we can change this state and change this country. Tonight is proof of that.
And CNN also projecting that businessman Zach Land, who has never held elected office, has now won the Republican nomination in Iowa's governor's race, defeating Congressman Randy Feenstra, who was endorsed by President Trump and the party establishment. A new Supreme Court ruling will allow Alabama to use a congressional map that will benefit Republicans in this year's midterm election. The ruling on Tuesday, it allows the state to cut one of 2 House districts represented by a black member of Congress who is also a Democrat. The high court decision, it comes despite the fact that Alabama has already held its congressional primaries. And the Alabama case, it is just the latest emergency order tied to the Supreme Court's April decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act.
Alabama had a map where of the 7 congressional districts in Alabama, 2 of those had been drawn to be majority black, Democrat-leaning districts. However, now as a result of this decision, that's going to go down to 1. And this is all based off of the Louisiana Supreme Court opinion that came down in late April. In that opinion, the U.S. Supreme Court said the states can essentially draw congressional lines for whatever political reasons they want. They cannot, however, consider race either way in drawing those lines. So the state of Alabama took that opinion and said, okay, we now want to undraw one of those majority black districts and go from 2 down to 1. And in tonight's opinion, the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 split, the 6 conservatives in the majority, the 3 liberals in the dissent, said, it's okay, Alabama, you can go ahead and do that. So the net out of the end of this is that Alabama will go from 2 majority black, Democratic-leaning districts down to 1.
Our thanks to Elie Honig, our legal analyst, and there is so much to discuss. Let's head over to Caroline Hellman, a Democratic strategist and professor of critical theory and social justice at Occidental College. I'm also joined by Mike Madrid, the co-founder of the Lincoln Project and founder of the Latino Working Class Project. Caroline, Mike, it is wonderful to have you both with me. Thank you so much for joining.
Good to see you, Polo.
Thanks for having us.
Mike, how about we start with you here as we watch the numbers come in from California. If we can start on the governor's race. We started with a little over 60 names. Now it seems that it's boiling down to 3, eventually down to 2. And it seems that Xavier Becerra is likely to be one of them. For Latinos in California, the biggest demographic, the largest demographic in that state, if we are to see him on the ballot, which seems very likely in a few months' time, what does he need to show to fellow Latinos in that state?
That's a fantastic question, because unlike a generation ago, what we're seeing is the transformation of the Latino vote away from a racial and ethnic voting bloc and more towards an economic pocketbook voter. We're starting to see kind of blue-collar cultural values replace ethnic values. And that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of correlation, but this middle class is under a lot of pressure here in California as it is throughout the country. And Becerra's coalition is really a lot more multiracial, multi-ethnic than you would imagine. Most of his Latino support is sitting around 40, maybe 50%. Conventional wisdom would think it's probably more 75, 80%. That might have been a generation ago, but it's not. You're seeing a middle class kind of revolting and pushing back against the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party and saying, we want this state fixed, and Xavier Becerra is going to be the candidate to do that for us.
Caroline, to you, as we continue to see those numbers, it's still too soon to say, but if we were to see Becerra facing off against his fellow Democrat, Tom Steyer, just curious from a strategic point of view, I mean, how would that play out? And then, of course, we'll get to the other and perhaps likely scenario.
Well, it would certainly be Becerra's preference that he run against a Republican, because if he's running against Steyer, this billionaire who spent over $200 million of his own money in this race, he's actually far more for progressive or liberal than Becerra, and he would shift the agenda. I think that Becerra probably has the best shot of winning, but it would be a very expensive kind of implosion of the Democratic Party. What we're actually seeing nationally, right, which is the centrist wing represented by Becerra going against the more progressive wing like the Zoran Mamdani's, the younger folks in the party, the Democratic Socialists in the party. Tom Steyer doesn't identify directly as that, but he would definitely pull the agenda further to the left, and it would be a very bloody battle on the Democratic side for the next 5 months.
And Caroline, what do Democrats take away from the numbers thus far in terms of Steve Hilton's performance, a Republican running in a blue state, a Republican backed by a president who's experiencing some of the lowest approval numbers?
I don't think that Steve Hilton has a snowball's chance in California because we are such an overwhelmingly Democratic state. He is a Trump-backed candidate, as you noted. He's also, a conservative. So even though he is very charismatic, and you can see if you listen to him and you close your eyes, you wouldn't know it's a Republican, right? He talks about affordability. He has a very compelling immigration story. But in a state like California, where we run 2-to-1 Democrat, sometimes 3-to-1, Becerra would very much like that matchup because it will be a shellacking, especially in the era of Trump.
How about we shift over to the LA mayor's race now? The top two will be facing off, just in a few months' time. Karen Bass, incumbent mayor, who held on, will be advancing to the runoff election. Now the question is, who will she be facing? Mike, perhaps just bring us up to speed on what voters especially in America's second largest city are hoping out of a potential second Karen Bass turn, or if they're looking elsewhere.
Yeah, and let's be really clear about this. Karen Bass is a pretty weak incumbent. The number of people who say Los Angeles is a great place to live or is heading in the right direction are much lower than they were 4 years ago when she took office. But campaigns are about choices. It's not about necessarily the choices they may want in a candidate, it's the choices before them. And Karen Bass has drawn some pretty good cards to deal with. She's got Nithya Raman, sort of a Democratic Socialist candidate to her left, and Spencer Pratt, who is basically this reality TV star MAGA candidate, both of which she stands to, I think, to do quite well against. The biggest challenge is whether or not she can get through this top two election cycle tonight, and it seems she's well on her way to do that. She's been pushing Spencer Pratt, promoting his candidacy, elevating him, because she wants a Republican versus Democratic match-off in a city that voted basically 17% for the last Republican. So there's a real hard ceiling for Spencer Pratt. As much of excitement and the brash, braggadocio style that he's got, this is still Los Angeles. And I don't think he goes much further than tonight. He will probably pick up a couple of those Nithya Raman votes out there, but 80% of those Democratic Socialist votes will go back and vote for Karen Bass. And I expect she's in a pretty commanding position if it is Spencer Pratt, who is in the top two with her.
Caroline, for you, what do you think should be the main takeaway for Democrats in California and also at the national level? Mike, it's on an important point there, which is this strength or lack of strength for some of these candidates. I mean, what do you think should be? I mean, should they see this as a warning?
Well, heading into the midterm elections, it is very clear looking at polling that the Democrats are not a beloved party, right? There's a lot of dissension. And of course, we're seeing the intergenerational conflict between the older guard in the party and a lot of upstarts who are challenging them in this midterm election cycle. We are also seeing the more progressive wing against the centrist wing. But at the end of the day, Democrats have a low approval rating with their own party members because there isn't strong party leadership and there isn't a really clear vision of the future. And I know this is kind of cliche, but most of what the energy has gone into has been opposing Donald Trump. And while that will get you to a certain point, and I will likely give the House of Representatives to the Democrats come the midterm elections and perhaps even the Senate, because he is so disliked, the party is in a bit of disarray. Although I will, very much agree with Mike that Karen Bass, although she's a very weak incumbent, she will easily beat Spencer Pratt if he is the candidate as, just somebody who is out of step with very Democratic Los Angeles and California, of course, being a Democratic stronghold more generally.
We'll see if he ends up on the ballot come November. Mike Madrid, Caroline Hellman, thank you so much. A lot up in the air. So grateful for the perspective from both of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Paulo.
Thank you.
And we have much more of our election coverage the morning after, ahead here on CNN. The very latest numbers in the California governor's race. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Back 6 states, they held their primaries on Tuesday night, including New Jersey, New Mexico, South Dakota, and Iowa. Let's go there now with CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton. Been watching those numbers all night. Harry, it's wonderful to see you. So we already know that Trump's pick for governor in Iowa has basically lost his GOP primary. What else does that magic wall behind you tell us?
Well, you've stolen a little. No, I'm just kidding. Look, this to me is just so notable. And it's so notable to me because Donald Trump has basically been invincible in Republican primaries. But it turns out that his pick, Randy Feenstra, actually went down in defeat against Zach Lane, who is supported Maha and a lot of support from the Republican base clearly out in the great state of Iowa. But here to me is what is so interesting. Okay, if you look, you might not be able to see it, so I'll tell you it. The margin of the vote was only 1,652. It was extremely tight. It was less than a point, and the margin was less than 2,000 votes. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting to me, Polo, because Donald Trump made a late endorsement in that race. And so we can kind of tell, hey, did that endorsement really help Feenstra all that much? Did it make a race that was going to be a blowout considerably tighter? Here's where it gets interesting. I went on the Iowa Secretary of State's website, and excuse my poor handwriting. I had to take a lot of handwriting classes in school. But what it did tell you, and I can tell you, is that Zach Lane actually beat Randy Feenstra among those who cast a vote on Tuesday in Iowa by about 5,000 votes. In other words, Donald Trump's endorsement may not have helped at all. If we had had the exact same Election Day vote that was the absentee vote, that is the vote cast before Election Day, Randy Feenstra would have won. Zach Lane was able to win despite Trump's endorsement and was able to win the Election Day vote despite Trump's endorsement. Now, the question is, what happens in Iowa? Does it just stay in Iowa, or does it become a national picture? The thing that I will note that makes Iowa very interesting is it is a much more rural state than, let's say, California is. And Donald Trump has been really struggling with rural voters. If you look at the Fox News polling, for example, back in March of 2025, compare it to the latest poll in May of 2026, Donald Trump has, get this, on his net approval rating among rural voters, has lost 34 percentage points off his net approval rating. That may explain what happened here in Iowa. We'll see again, though, Polo, whether it goes nationwide. But either way, a black eye on what has traditionally been a very strong record for Donald Trump in Republican primaries.
No, it's absolutely, you bring up a fascinating point there, which is if that Trump support isn't necessarily the only thing that's needed to guarantee a win, what will those future Republican candidates be thinking come the midterms?
We'll see.
We'll turn to you, I'm sure, again for an answer. By the way, your handwriting, much better than mine, especially at 4:25 in the morning. Thank you, Harry Enton.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, let's move now to the acting U.S. Attorney General, who says that plans for a $1.8 billion so-called anti-weaponization fund at the Justice Department, that those plans are not moving forward. The fund was originally part of a settlement between the IRS and President Trump, members of the Trump family, as well as some of their businesses. CNN's Paula Reed with more details on this sudden shift.
Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche appeared before House lawmakers on the Appropriations Committee Tuesday, where he officially announced that the administration will not be moving forward with its controversial $1.8 billion fund for anyone who believes they were wrongly investigated by the Justice Department. Now, this is especially surprising because it's a rare example of the administration backing off of a controversial move. And for roughly 2 weeks, administration officials, including Blanche, have been insisting that not only is this fund legal, but it's something that taxpayers would want their tax dollars spent on. Lawyers, both inside the administration, outside the administration, remain committed to the fund, even in the face of significant blowback from Republicans. But over the past week or so, it had become clear to political advisors that this was going to be a political liability that could impact Republicans through that critical midterm period later this year. So it's that potential political cost that ultimately got them to back off of this. But this fund is part of a larger settlement between the government and President Trump to resolve his $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS. And now, as part of that agreement, the government agreed not to investigate the president, his family, or his business for past tax issues. Now, the acting attorney general said Tuesday that still stands. And it's clear it would take significant political blowback to get the administration to move from that part of this controversial settlement. Paula Reed, CNN, Washington.
And at this hour, we are still waiting to find out who Karen Bass will be facing in the Los Angeles mayor's race in a few months. We'll be checking some of the latest vote totals that are coming out of California. And welcome back. Let's take a moment now to check in on the results of California's key primary races so far. There are still plenty of votes that are left to count in the race for governor, but the very latest data is now showing the two candidates are starting to pull ahead. Remember, this was a very packed bunch. It is now boiling down to, you see Steve Hilton, Republican, supported by President Trump, former Fox News host, leading the pack there with Javier Becerra closely behind, a fellow Biden administration official and former attorney general, and potentially could become the first Latino governor to lead that state should he end up on the ballot and then eventually win come the midterms. And then Tom Steyer, the question here, can he still make up ground? It seems when you look on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen that he still has some time with only 56% of the vote tabulated. And this is a tabulation that is likely to continue into the days, perhaps even weeks to come. So we're going to be tracking that very closely. Let's look at the numbers live, though, and head back to Harry Enten, who's joining me at the Magic Wall. Starting again with LA mayor, it seems like that number ticked up slightly, right, in terms of the numbers that have come in.
Yeah, it's been ticking up and ticking up and ticking up. And, you know, I have my hand drawn 55% in. Look, as we have been discussing, Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, this is a nonpartisan race, but she's a Democrat. She's advanced to the runoff. The question is, who gets the second spot in that runoff? Is it Spencer Pratt, who's currently in second place? Again, it's a nonpartisan election, but he's been backed by mostly Republicans. Or is it Nithya Raman, who has been mostly backed by Democrats? Now, Karen Bass would love to face Spencer Pratt because LA is such a Democratic city, and most of the polling for a runoff has suggested she would beat Pratt rather easily. Raman is someone she probably doesn't want to face based upon the city registration and more than that as well, the pre-election polling. She has been gaining on Pratt as more of the vote has come in. It was 10 points when I first looked at it. It's now standing, what is this? Some quick math here, at about 7.6 points. And we do expect those later ballots, at least traditionally speaking, have been more Democratic leaning. Will they be Democratic leaning enough for Raman to catch Pratt? We'll just have to wait and see. But at this point, what we do know is that Karen Bass is advancing to the runoff. Now, beyond that, of course, we're talking about California governor. Now, California governor, the rule is pretty simple. The top two vote getters advance. Now, there is party registration. You do, in fact, see who's the Republican, who's the Democrat. Steve Hilton has been leading for most of the night, but only at, 27.7% of the vote. Javier Becerra, you mentioned earlier, former AG, former Biden administration official, 25.4%. But again, the key nugget here, is it's 56% of the estimated vote in. And the same rules that apply to Los Angeles apply statewide as well. Traditionally speaking, those later ballots, and this year I believe that might actually be a little bit even more of a boost for Democrats, have been Democratic leaning. Still, Javier Becerra, I think, is in pretty good position. Part of the reason why is I want you to look at all of this Columbia blue around the San Francisco area. That should be Tom Steyer's home base. But Javier Becerra has actually been doing pretty gosh darn well there. So I think Becerra's in pretty good shape, Polo. I think the question is, can Steyer actually catch Hilton? Will Hilton's vote total fall? That's what a lot of the pre-election polling was suggesting about the later results in. But we'll just have to wait and see. But at this point, it's likely either one Republican, one Democrat, or two Democrats, Polo.
Harry Enten, following those numbers live. Thank you so much. Let's head back to our panel now. And head over to Mike Madrid and Caroline Hellman for a little bit more. As we continue to watch those numbers, Caroline, let's pick up where Harry left off there and some of those numbers. It may be some time before we get a full picture, full results. For viewers around the world who may be unfamiliar with the tabulation process in California, I'm wondering if you just bring them up to speed in terms of why it's so meticulous and time-consuming.
Sure. And what we're seeing is called the red mirage, which is that Republicans return their ballots, typically will vote earlier and return their ballots earlier than Democrats. And so what we are seeing is a lot of voters on the Democratic side, about 85% of them, waiting to cast their vote, to be more strategic. And as a result of that, we're seeing, red meaning Republican, early success or early surging, both at the California state level and even in LA. And then we will see in the next couple of days, as the counting happens, that we will see a growth in terms of Democratic candidates and ballots cast. And in California, we have an issue here in that we accept ballots up until the day of, as long as they're postmarked, even if they arrive after Election Day, which means the count takes a long time. In fact, we are kind of known for that. And I will say that Governor Newsom passed a law moving the amount of time to count the votes from 30 days down to 13. But 13 days is a long time. Hopefully we will get the results quicker than that in California.
Caroline, it's so early, but what's your prediction? Do you think we could possibly see a two-Democrat race in terms of the governor's primary?
We could. I will say that the 7-point gap that Hilton opened over Steyer pretty early on, that's a lot to make up for Steyer. Now, could it happen? It certainly could. It's not likely.
Mike, to you, what is your prediction when it comes to the candidates that we're likely to see come November?
Yeah, I think that's a very accurate characterization. It is possible. It's highly unlikely. I'd probably put it about a 15% chance, maybe as generous as 20%. We are seeing in the late count, Tom Steyer, the kind of wealthy white billionaire candidate, actually pick up, overperforming in places like San Francisco, Marin County, Santa Barbara County, some of these wealthy white exclusive enclaves where demographically he is doing better. The question really is, can he catch Hilton? And as was just pointed out, Carolyn just pointed out, Hilton was also benefiting from a late Republican surge too, because there was a fear that Republicans could be locked out. So one of the unfortunate dynamics of California's democratic system with a small d is you have voters voting more strategically as opposed to whether they're voting the candidates that they want to or not. So Hilton will probably get a little bit stronger too, as Tom Steyer does. But you also have to recognize that Becerra, all three of these, they're all heading in a forward trajectory as undecided start to consolidate and as third-tier candidates start to lose their support. The Mahan, Katie Porter, Antonio Villaraigosa supporters were fleeing those candidacies and supporting stronger campaigns.
Mike, you also keep your finger on the pulse of the Latino vote, specifically. I'm just curious if you could just sort of look through that lens and how voters, we could start in California perhaps, are looking at this election, are looking at these candidates, perhaps if they live in Los Angeles when they're choosing their next leader, and then also when they're choosing their next chief executive of the state.
Sure, and this does have really big national implications. If it is a Republican and a Democrat running, if it is Becerra, who would be the first Latino governor in modern times. We did have one, Romualdo Pacheco, back in 1857, but in 150 years, we in California have not had a Latino governor running against a Republican, Steve Hilton. What you're going to have is this California, which tends to be a trendsetter for the rest of the country and certainly for the Democratic Party, reorienting away from wealthy white establishment candidates like a Tom Steyer and going back towards its middle-class, blue-collar, multiracial roots where, frankly, the Democratic Party has had a lot of trouble over the past decade. They've been losing Black, Latino, middle-class, working-class voters. This is a signal that a lot of these voters are stepping up and kind of demanding something different from their party and could potentially reorient the narrative of where the party is heading going into the general election after these midterms as the party continues to try to search for who it is, what its identity is, and whether it is this sort of cultural elite party or a working class party. The governor of California, being the son of immigrants and a Latino working class family, I think positions them very strongly to be more competitive going forward.
Caroline, the last word goes to you. As you help us look ahead as well into the November midterms, what will you be watching the closest from the Democratic side of things?
Well, I will be looking at these redistricted states to see whether or not, for example, the 5 seats that Democrats are supposed to pick up stick. We know that the Supreme Court had the recent rulings and the gutting of the Voting Rights Act has meant that Republicans will have about an 8-seat advantage just through redistricting, meaning choosing voters rather than voters choosing the candidates. Although I will say in the House, it all Democrats need to do is pick up 2 seats. And in an average year, when you have a president who's underwater, you pick up 27 seats. So I'll be looking for that trend and that wave happening in November.
Caroline Heldman, Mike Madrid, thank you guys so much for your analysis and for your company on this post-election night coverage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you.
Still to come on CNN Newsroom, the U.S. and Iran, they are trading strikes as fragile ceasefire. As that still hangs in the balance, we'll have a live report from the region in a moment. We're following developments out of the Middle East where the U.S. and Iran traded strikes in one of the biggest nights of attacks. And that's since the ceasefire was put into place in April. But Iranian media outlets, they're signaling that talks between Tehran and Washington are still ongoing. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the negotiations on Iran's nuclear program would depend on whether Tehran reopens that critical Strait of Hormuz, and that it would be highly technical and could possibly take months.
They have to commit to very specific negotiations on the disposition of the highly enriched uranium that still is buried deep in a mountain somewhere. Obviously, these are highly technical matters, so I don't think you could work those out in 5 days. That would require a team of experts to meet over a 30, 60, 90-day period and work out the details. But they have to commit to their willingness to do that.
Will they commit, and what is the latest out of the Middle East? Let's go ahead and go to CNN's Paula Hancock, who joins me live from Abu Dhabi. Paula, good afternoon. The trading of these strikes, this back and forth between the U.S. and Iran, what is the latest there?
Well, Paula, what we saw Tuesday into Wednesday was really among the most significant escalation of strikes that we have seen between the U.S. and Iran since the ceasefire began back in April. What we heard from U.S. Central Command is that they did target and strike a vessel that was on its way to an Iranian port, saying it hadn't complied with the U.S. blockade on the Strait of Hormuz. We then saw Iran's military targeting another vessel in the area. Now, CENTCOM says that once that had happened, they then targeted what they called an Iranian military facility on Qeshm Island near the Strait of Hormuz as well, and we saw Iranian strikes against Gulf nations. Now, it was Kuwait and Bahrain that had been targeted in the early hours of Wednesday morning. Tehran saying that it was targeting a helicopter and airbase and also the U.S. Fifth Fleet in Bahrain. But the U.S. confirmed none of its assets were affected. Now, what was affected in Kuwait was its international airports. We have heard from state media saying that several people were injured, that the international airport itself was damaged. It had only reopened just a couple of days ago after a strike in February. Polo?
And separately, Paula, there are these, what is another round of talks on the front of Israel and Lebanon. Those talks expected in the U.S. today, is my understanding. I mean, help us preview that.
So we've had a day of talks on Tuesday. These are US-mediated talks through the State Department between the ambassadors of the two countries, and they are expected to continue today. The US is really trying to push this process forward, realizing just how closely connected it is to success of a deal between the US and Iran. Iran earlier this week suspending talks with the US, saying that Israel was continuing to target Lebanon, and so they were not going to entertain these ongoing precarious and fragile talks with the US. Now, we have since seen Israel pull back somewhat. They have said that they're not going to be targeting Beirut, but they are still targeting Hezbollah, they say, in southern Lebanon. Polo?
CNN's Paula Hancock with that live report from Abu Dhabi. Thank you, Paula. There's also a new study that's finding a large majority of people in the U.S. are worried about money and facing tough trade-offs. When we come back here on CNN Newsroom, what separates financially fulfilled Americans from those who are financially stressed? There is a new study that shows more than 8 in 10 Americans are feeling stress, strain, or uncertainty about their finances. And the research comes as inflation hit a 3-year high in April, as persistently high gas prices put pressure on household budgets. But the study also reveals a mixed picture about how Americans feel when it comes to their financial well-being. Here's CNN's Matt Egan to explain.
Unfortunately, many Americans are stressing about money these days. They're struggling from years of high inflation, and all too often their paychecks are failing to keep up with higher prices. So this survey finds that just 16% of Americans are financially fulfilled, where they're feeling confident and their finances are stable. Far more, 51% are considered financially conflicted. They're not in crisis, but they're not feeling confident either. And look at this, 32%, almost 1 in 3 are financially stressed, where they are feeling overwhelmed by their finances. Now, among those who are financially stressed, this survey finds that only 19% can cover a $10,000 expense with savings. Presumably, the rest of them would have to resort to borrowing. And about half, 52%, say that finances are controlling their lives, and the vast majority, 73%, say that they've experienced actual stress when thinking about money. So who is in this financially stressed category? Well, this survey finds that it skews towards younger generations. About 4 in 10 Gen Zers, 4 in 10 millennials are in this financially stressed category. Also tends to skew towards non-white households, specifically Black and Hispanic households. But look, this is a bipartisan issue. About 1 in 3 Democrats are financially stressed, and almost 1 in 4 Republicans. And this survey from Gallup and Edward Jones, it's not an anomaly. It's backed up by other recent surveys. A recent CNN poll finds that 51% of Americans are dissatisfied with their own financial situation. University of Michigan found that consumer sentiment in May plunged to all-time lows, lower than even during the worst days of the 2008 financial crisis. And the New York Fed found that about 1 in 10 households are facing food insecurity, where they are struggling to find enough food to feed their families, and often, or at least occasionally, have even had their children forced to skip meals. And look, I think this is just another reminder of how beneath the surface of those often positive headlines about high stock prices and low unemployment, many Americans are struggling, often because of the cost of living. Let me just give you one example. I spoke to a 55-year-old woman in Montana who told me that she was forced to cancel her annual family vacation. And she's delayed buying a new car to replace her aging one because she says that her income, it's just not keeping up with prices. Specifically, she said the cost of groceries feels like that's doubled in recent years. She said that her utility bills have basically doubled in recent years. And so she's had to cut back elsewhere. And I think that that financial pressure that she's feeling, clearly she's not alone in those feelings. Back to you guys.
CBS News has fired veteran 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley. This happened just a day after he accused the network's editor-in-chief of, quote, murdering the network's flagship program. According to a source, Pelley said that Barry Weiss and the show's new executive director, Nick Bilton, would never be welcomed and that they are not qualified for their jobs. Bilton responded in a letter to Pelley released by CBS, saying, quote, you hijacked my first meeting with staff to disparage me, my qualifications, and my intentions with remarkable incivility and contempt. Industry analysts are telling CNN that this is likely to lead to a Pelley lawsuit against CBS. So we'll see if that happens. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Polo Sandoval in New York. Our coverage continues with CNN This Morning with Audie Cornish.
Okay, thanks for being here. It's election night in America continued. 6 states held primaries, and some of the results still coming in at this hour. Good morning, everybody. I'm Audie Cornish, and we're going to start with the biggest races taking place in California. That's where voters had their say in a crowded field for who will replace Gavin Newsom as governor.
I relate to a couple of different candidates. Ultimately, I went with Steyer because I felt like his vision of what California could be most closely resembled what mine was.
I voted for Steve Hilton. I feel that the Democrats screwed up this place. I've been here for over 40 years, and from Reagan to them, it's been horrible.
I'm going to take Javier Becerra. I don't want anybody that doesn't have experience in running government. I want somebody that actually knows. He's been with the Obama administration. The man has been Attorney General. He's done a lot of work, and so that's what I want.
So the votes are still coming in. The latest projections show Republican Steve Hilton and Democrat Javier Becerra at the head of the pack, billionaire Tom Steyer in third.
We're going to wait till every ballot is counted. We're going to give democracy a time to work, and we know we finished really strong.
Like my parents, I never gave up. Never stopped putting one foot in front of the other. Never stopped believing in the beacon-like goodness of California. And thankfully, neither did you.
What we're really watching is the gap between me and the third-placed candidate, Tom Steyer. As long as that gap stays roughly where it is, then Californians will have a choice for change in the general election. Now, that's what really matters here.
Joining me now to break all this down, CNN chief data analyst Harry Enten. So, Harry, tell me, this was such a crowded race. How far ahead when we say that Steve Hilton and Javier Becerra are?
Yeah, I mean, look, here are a couple of key nuggets that I think are so important to keep in mind. Okay, let's just talk about where the race is right now. You got Steve Hilton, he's at 27.7% of the vote. So he's not even at 30%, he's leading the pack. You got Javier Becerra at 25.4%, and then you got Tom Steyer at 19.6%. Now, a couple of key nuggets I want you to keep in mind. Number one, take a look at this number, and if you can't see it, I'll read it to you. 56% of the estimated vote is in. That's just an estimate, but that means that upwards of 44% of the vote is still remaining to be counted. And historically speaking, and based upon the trends that we've seen with the ballot delivery so far, the later ballots that get counted tend to be more Democratic. So the question is, can Steyer rise as those late ballots get in? Can Hilton hold on to his position? Can Becerra hold on to his position? My guess is Becerra can. If there's one trend we've generally seen in the years is the Republicans tend to fall as we get more of the votes in from California, and the Democrats tend to rise. And I think that was part of the reason why Steve Hilton was saying in that clip that you played, hey, can I keep that position over Tom Steyer remaining in third place?
There was so much talk about this so-called jungle primary. Do you have any sense about turnout?
Yeah, okay. So, you know, if right now we're looking at this, what are we talking about? We are talking about a lot of people that are turning out. I mean, you know, we've seen in California, obviously it's a big state, but we are talking about, what is this, 1.3 million, 1.2 million, nearly 955,000. So we are talking about millions upon millions upon millions of votes. And I think the question is, where can those remaining votes, that 44% that we still have left out, where can Tom Steyer make up that ground? And I'll tell you where I'm looking at right in this area right here. We see a lot of Columbia blue for Javier Becerra, right? And why is that important? Because the San Francisco area, which is the area I circled on here, that's actually where Tom Steyer is from. So if we are in fact expecting that Tom Steyer is going to make up those votes, it is likely to come from areas like this in and around San Francisco. If Tom Steyer can actually start turning some of this Columbia blue into navy blue for him, hey, then it might be game on.
I like you pointing out San Francisco because obviously there was a race to replace Nancy Pelosi where she backed a candidate that was not able to prevail, at least so far. Can you give me the update on that?
Yeah, I can give you the update on that. Let's see if I can go there. Why don't we go there? We're going to go down, and I'm going to take my pen off, and we're going to go. And what are we looking at? Hey, I clicked it on the right time. There we go. Here we go. California's 11th district. Connie Chen was the person that, in fact, Nancy Pelosi backed. Right now in that top two, Connie Chen is, in fact, in that top two. Now, what's really interesting is the third place candidate right now. That was actually Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's former chief of staff. Now, she did not back him, but he spent a lot of money on this race. And look at this. He is very distant at this point, way back of the pack. But right now it looks like Weiner and Chan going to be the top two. We'll see in the fall whether or not that Chan's actually able to replace Pelosi, whether or not she has the juice in her own district.
Okay, we're done nerding out because I know people want to know about Spencer Pratt and the LA mayor's race. What is the state of play there?
What is the state of play there? Well, why don't I pull it up? Oh, there we go. I got it here. Okay, what is the state of play? We got 58% of the vote, and Karen Bass, the incumbent mayor, a Democrat, though they all run. It's a nonpartisan race. She is into the runoff. She is advanced. We have projected that. She's at 35.8%. The question is, can Spencer Pratt, who is backed mostly by Republicans, he's right now in second place, but I've been keeping an eye on the results, and more of them have come in. And what we've seen is Nydia Rahman, another Democrat, although again appearing on a nonpartisan ballot, has closed the margin as more of those votes have come in. She's now down by what? A little bit less than 8 points. The question is, will the trend that we see, that we expect to see, that is the later ballots being more Democratic, can they in fact allow her to close that gap with Pratt? I can tell you Karen Bass is hoping that she faces Pratt in the fall, because the election polling that I have seen suggested she'd be a heavy favorite over Pratt versus Rahman. That would be a very interesting race indeed.
Also, I noticed you saying more Democratic votes, but in a situation between Bass and Rahman, you're talking about someone who ran to the left of Bass. I mean, are there districts and people who are guess would be considered more progressive areas of a California, of LA, that she could benefit from at this point in the game?
Oh, she could absolutely benefit. I was to L.A. a few months ago. There are definitely some progressive areas out there, and I do think the question is, do those people who were returning those late ballots, were they saying, hey, you know what, Pratt has been rising in the polls, I want to stop him, and the safest way to do that is maybe to vote for Bass, who we think might be able, would easily be able to take him on? Or are they going to say, you know what, I want to keep Bass down, and we know that Bass is higher up in the polls, maybe we vote for Rahman and try and kick Bass out at the early part of the stage in this round instead of waiting for the runoff?
Okay, so Harry, thanks so much for talking with us about California. We're going to check in with you later because, as we talked about half a dozen states had some kind of vote, and I'd love to hear, what we've learned so far. So Harry Enten will be back with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And coming up on CNN this morning, we're going to talk about the president's so-called anti-weaponization fund. It is dead, what the acting attorney general told lawmakers when they asked about what was going on with it. And it does look like maybe Spencer Pratt could advance in the November runoff for LA mayor. We're going to have the group chat come in to talk about it.
No more TV stars, please. No more reality stars, TV stars. We don't need that anymore.
Welcome back to CNN's election coverage, where we are closely following the results for mayor of Los Angeles. So the top three include incumbent mayor Karen Bass. CNN projects she will move on to the general election. Former reality TV star Spencer Pratt may be in second place. And rounding out the top three, former city councilwoman Nydia Rahman. Now the top two head to the general election in the fall.
Over these last 3.5 years, we have laid a foundation, and we're going to build on that foundation because we know what a city we have and what a city we can be. And let me just say that tomorrow begins the second half of this journey.
Many thousands of votes will be counted in the days ahead, and we may not get an answer we like, but regardless of what happens next, nobody can take away what all of us have built together.
Oh, I mean, she knows it's on. I hope she's ready, because I literally could not be more excited.
Joining me now in the group chat, Mike Leone, host of Can We Please Talk, and Zach Wolf, CNN politics senior writer, and Sabrina Rodriguez, politics reporter at the Wall Street Journal, and also a person who knows a lot about LA. Right? You were out there, you went home. So it was a time. It was a time.
So I forever rep Miami, but a personal interest has been the Los Angeles mayor's race, and having been someone who grew up watching The Hills and then seeing Spencer Pratt pivot to now being a political
You
candidate.
speak as the coveted millennial woman voter.
The Hills fan is what she said.
Look, Hills fan / person who existed on TikTok when the Palisades fire happened, saw all the videos, all the content that he was posting about what happened, him really calling out the government and the mismanagement and the conversation around what was going on and what wasn't going on at the time. So it wasn't a total surprise to see him go and decide to run for mayor. It has been interesting to see how Mayor Karen Bass is navigating it. And I think there was obviously this hope from the Bass side of things that she could move on to, a clean November race and not have to deal with Spencer Pratt.
Yeah,
but
let's just show people right now we are learning when it comes to Los Angeles, Karen Bass does remain ahead, but Spencer Pratt is moving and pulling further away from Nithya Raman, who is a city politician who had hoped to run to the left of Karen Bass on a more progressive sort of stance.
But it looks like we are poised to see a lot more AI videos from Pratt and his allies
you can call it
heading
slop.
to November.
It's fine. You can call it slop.
Audio, on that point, I'm so glad you brought that up, Sabrina. I can't tell you how many people have shown me his video. Have you seen the Spencer Pratt videos? And I think campaigns could potentially start using some of this. I think if you look at the latest YouGov, there was a YouGov poll around candidates and what do you think of candidates and their back issues? And he's had some back issues. He had an interview with Jake Tapper here on CNN. He talked a little bit about those issues. Jake pressed him on some of that stuff. But it's all out the window now. We're in a different time. Candidates now can have reality TV backgrounds like The Hills. I can't tell you whether or not I watched it.
Or The Apprentice.
Or The Apprentice, exactly.
I mean, generationally,
Right.
generationally, this makes sense. Meaning, when Trump used his fame, which had been built up over decades, frankly, and then added social media to that, at the time that was Twitter, that set the whole thing on overdrive. You just laid out the same thing for Pratt, where you were like, I grew up watching him on X, and then I started to see him at Y, and now all of a sudden I'm watching the content, in these videos, and that is a kind of brand awareness that's like, you can't buy that.
No, and it's going to be larger than campaigns and like the normal kind of politics that we know, in the same way I think that Trump was. If he's able to really make a play against Bass in the general election, and by the way, it's just now starting, so we're going to have months and months of this. Things change. That's going to be because of the AI videos that are generated around him, not necessarily because of what he specifically, I think, is doing.
Because this is a jungle primary, I also want to reframe this in a different way, which is that you have someone who represents the incumbent, which around the country there's been a lot of incumbents took a hit. We're going to talk about this later in the program. And then you've also got what I would call the abundance, housing, economic state of play type candidate, which I think Pratt is being that person that's like, things are not running well. I care about the zoning, I care about the housing, I care about where the unhoused and homeless are. And that is actually an ongoing conversation with the Democratic Party as well.
If I can say two things about Spencer Pratt that I have seen from interviews that he has done, has been about the Palisades fire. He has talked about that repeatedly. And when his past comments about 9/11 and the inside job that Jake pressed him on in that interview, he talked about, hey, government has failed us. Yes, I made mistakes back then, but government has failed us. He's harped on those two things, and I think those are two things that other candidates are starting to talk about. He lives in Los Angeles. He lives in this county. He was affected by this. So I think there's the reason for the swelling, but again, if you look at his traditional background, he has no traditional background in politics.
I would add in the homelessness issue, too, which he has also been very into, and that is a very LA-specific or California-specific issue.
California-specific, for sure. Let me just play for you, Zach, a voter. We can talk on the other side of this.
He's a human person. He lives here. He knows what goes on.
What do you think about Pratt's unconventional approach?
I love it.
What is it that you love about it?
He's another Trump.
I just want to see a change, that's all. So,
but not a Spencer Pratt kind of change.
Not the reality TV star, never held a job kind of change, yes.
I think that's an excellent distillation of 2 points of view on the kind of fame we're talking about. That someone sees it as like, he's like a Trump, this is going to be a change, this is going to be great, and somebody who is like, yuck, I'm over it, I don't want this kind of person in politics, meaning someone coming from the entertainment space and leading with that.
Yeah, and he is definitely inside the entertainment. So he doesn't even have what Trump had, which was his business career or, perception of his business career that he could push back and look at. Pratt's qualification for governor is that he lost his house, and he's angry about it.
Yeah,
and
which
that's not
single-issue
nearly as much.
candidates, whether that is Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the moms who ran after their sons were killed by police, you can become an activated person and candidate on a single topic. It's getting to the general, right, and having to talk about all those other things, including your past.
Well, and then being very specific in the general about combating, saying, getting a little more into the weeds of what you actually will do that will help people's lives. And I think that's where, we'll see what he comes up with. But it can't just be, no, I'm not the other person.
Yeah. I think let's also keep in mind Los Angeles is like a very democratic city. So coming out of this, of course, there's going to be the conversation about him being a Republican around, folks in the Trump administration, folks in the Republican Party that are pushing for him. And I do think, looking at a city like Los Angeles that is supportive.
Or a lot more video with him on Alex Jones.
It's
right,
something that is going to
No,
be,
I'm serious. The kinds of things
that's going to come up at the end of the day. Like right now, he is really drawing attention to issues in the city and raising awareness and clearly raising a national profile and conversation around what's going on in Los Angeles. But again, as this general election really starts, now we are going to see some of that real political tension around these two parties at the end of the day.
Okay, I want to just have you guys hold on a second. Here's what we know about this race at this point. Nithya Raman right now still sitting at around 22%, and so it is looking more and more like Spencer Pratt and Karen Bass will be headed to a runoff this fall in the mayor's race for Los Angeles. Now, after the break on CNN this morning, we're going to talk about why the state is stepping in, why officials are suing the private company that owns the New Jersey Detention Center at the center of that controversy. Plus, a Trump-backed Republican loses the Iowa governor primary. Okay, it's now 25 minutes past the hour. This is your morning roundup. Some of the stories that you may have missed overnight. So the fight over New Jersey's Delaney Hall Immigrant Detention Facility, it's now going to the state because officials are going to sue to gain access for health inspectors. Protests over alleged inhumane conditions inside are still drawing crowds outside. And U.S. military leaders say they have disabled an oil tanker heading towards an Iranian oil port. In a Tuesday press release, U.S. Central Command says it hit the tanker with a Hellfire missile. Officials say the Botswana-flagged vessel was heading towards Karg Island, and the ship's crew ignored warnings. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche confirms it. President Trump's nearly $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund is now dead. On Tuesday, Blanche testified before a House subcommittee about the decision to scrap the fund, which many viewed as a way to pay out Trump's allies.
We are not moving forward with the fund, period. The reasons for the fund is something that President Trump talked about for a long time, which is the fact that there were a lot of people in this country who had their government weaponized against them. The reasons for the fund, I think, it remain as important as they were before, but we are not moving forward with the fund.
Turning to the panel here, because as a person who used to cover the Senate, I'm going to use an inside term, which is that Blanche got spanked when he went up there by Senate Republicans who were like, we hate this, we don't want it, what are you doing? And then pretty much stymied the administration's other priorities. Is this, how rare is a retreat like this?
I would put this up there with the Epstein files in things that they were just absolutely had to reverse course on. It seems like those are the two things that led to true revolts on Capitol Hill. The thing they aren't going back on, however, that everybody needs to be paying attention to is the, essential immunity for Donald Trump and his family and his businesses on taxes. So
meaning they can never be audited ever.
Yeah.
Him, his family, it doesn't matter what they do, which has some implications given the money that they're making both in the crypto space and other deals abroad, sovereign wealth funds and things like that.
It was also fascinating to see just how quick and swift the backlash to this was.
Yeah, it was
I think
almost instantaneous.
Sometimes it's like the administration will put something out. There's kind of like a vibe check of like how people are feeling about it before you hear anything from the Hill. And this was one where like the weaponization fund was announced and a quick like this is not. So it really is rare. You can't underscore it enough.
To that end, also how wide it was. Lisa Murkowski,
It was bipartisan.
Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins saying is one thing. Senator Kennedy saying that, hey, you have to follow a court order. I don't want to hear this nonsense. Like, that was really alarming
Yeah, or we
and
won't
intriguing.
do immigration. I think it's holding
exactly.
the other things hostage. Well, we're going to follow up on this, frankly, because as you heard Blanche said, they still think it's important. So the question is there another way for them to dispense the money that they want? In the meantime, we are, of course, following these election results in the biggest races from this primary night. You've got a Republican pulling ahead in California's governor's race. We're going to talk about why the former frontrunner's fall from grace may have helped that. And then, good early morning, we're going to take a live look at the LA skyline. Welcome back to CNN's special coverage of election night in America. We are tracking California, where votes are still being counted, and the primary race for governor is too close to call. The latest projections show Republican Stephen Hilton and Democrat Javier Becerra in the top two positions, with billionaire Tom Steyer in third. The top two advance to the general election in November.
As long as we can make it into the top two, Californians will be able to change the trajectory of our state away from policies that have given us the highest poverty rate, the highest unemployment rate in the country, the highest cost of living, all the problems that we know about, but we can turn them around with common sense, practical ideas such as the ones I'm running on to make our state, in my word, Cal-affordable.
So in the LA mayor's race, incumbent Democrat Karen Bass will advance in the November runoff. Republican reality star Spencer Pratt appears likely to advance with her. In Iowa, that Republican primary for governor, a notable end to the president's winning streak. Trump-backed Randy Feenstra conceding to businessman Zach Lane in the Republican primary. And in New Mexico, former Interior Secretary Deb Haaland won the Democratic nomination for governor with more than 70% of that vote.
We've never had a Native American governor in New Mexico. We're a multicultural state. I think it's important. I think representation matters, especially in a political era such as this.
Okay, we're going to bring in CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enton. Harry, you're back. Tell us how close these ballots are in the governor's race for California, and also what's happening on the Republican side.
Yeah, I mean, look, here's the situation in California. There are a couple of key nuggets to keep in mind. First off, I just want to point out, we got 57% of the estimated vote in, and this is just an estimate, right? We know, historically speaking, that California takes days, weeks to count its ballots. And what we see right now, what I think is so important, is you see Steve Hilton at 27.8%, Javier Becerra 25.4%. The key question is the third man in this race, Tom Steyer, who's at 19.6%. Historically speaking, the late ballots have tended to shift the overall vote to be more Democratic. Can Tom Steyer use those late ballots that come in to actually close the gap, not just between him and Becerra, but him and Hilton? And Hilton, of course, right now at 27.8%. Now, you mentioned, of course, what about that other Republican? Well, there was all this talk earlier on in the campaign. Hey, maybe Chad Bianco and Steve Hilton, they would combine, they would be the top two spots and lock out the Democrats. It ain't happening, Audie. It ain't happening. Bianco is way back. At this point, the real question is, will Steve Hilton make the second round, actually make it to the general election? At this point, he is in the lead, but we still got a lot of votes to be counted, and Steyer is close enough whereby we can't say for sure who's going to actually make the November general election.
Because we're still waiting on that, then, do you mind if we go over to Iowa? Because they also are talking about the governor's race. There was a Iowa Republican primary there between two interesting candidates, an incumbent who had the backing of Trump last minute, and that's not the person it looks like is coming out on top. Tell me about Lon.
Yeah, okay. So what are we talking about? Zach Lane ends up winning this race. And what's so interesting, right? Randy Feenstra, who in fact is the incumbent in Iowa's 4th congressional district, Trump came in with a late endorsement. And what we've seen historically speaking is when Trump endorses you in a Republican primary, hey, you go on and win. But that did not happen here. And more interesting than that, I brought out my sheet of paper here. This is really high-tech math right here. Okay, I'm going to draw it for you on the screen, because what is so interesting to me is there were absentee votes and there were election day votes. And what happened in the election day vote after Trump made that endorsement? Guess who came ahead by 5,000 votes? 5K votes? It was Zach Lane who won that election day vote by 5,000 votes. And what's so interesting is, look at the margin. The overall margin is only 1,652. That means that Lane won this election with an election day push of votes, even after Trump made the endorsement. I think back to the fact that Trump, the first time he ran, he lost the Iowa caucuses, and it turns out he lost in Iowa yet again here in a Republican primary or caucus.
I want to ask you about just kind of a quirky race, which is New Jersey's 7th district. Stay with me. And that's because you have a congressperson who has been kind of missing in action the last couple of months. He's only given one interview in that time. This is Tom Keene, Jr. I'm sure he kind of sailed to victory here, but did we see anything interesting in the way of turnout?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that I think is so interesting, is the Democrats got who they wanted to run in that district, in Rebecca Bennett. And what is so important to note here is while Kaine ran unopposed, this is a district that only voted for Donald Trump, I believe, by about 1 point. 1 point in that district. And it was a district that Joe Biden, in fact, won by, I believe, 4 points. And so what we're dealing with now is an absentee congressman who has not been seen for a very long period of time. Democrats got the candidate they wanted. You can remember last year in New Jersey, in that gubernatorial race, the Democrat easily won, blew the water out of it. And the question is, if New Jersey is as blue this time around, and given that this is a swing district, can Tom Keene actually survive this general election come November? I think it's awfully difficult if, you know, nobody's actually seeing him.
Okay, Harry, thank you so much. I hope you get some rest one day
I'm going to
soon.
try my voice. My voice is a little going, but I got some water here. I'm going to take a drink.
All right. You guys, I want to have this conversation with you about the California governor's race. You heard Harry there. It basically became a kind of free-for-all after Congressman Eric Swalwell withdrew over allegations of misconduct. So who took advantage? Who missed out? Sabrina, can I start with you? You've got someone like Dolores Huerta crediting Latinos, basically, for the rise of Becerra. Let me play that for you.
I think it's kind of a retribution because we know that the Latino community has been under such a vicious attack from the Trump administration, not only in California, but throughout the United States of America. And so I think this will demonstrate to the world that, number one, that we are very competent individuals and that we do have the leadership within our community that can govern.
Let me play for you another pundit. Same argument, different tone. Jesse Waters, Fox News.
He's up against the guy whose biggest qualification is the sound of his name. In a state that's half Hispanic, Javier Becerra.
Hearing the pronunciation there, really.
It's Becerra.
Really leaned in. Really leaned in.
I think Latinos will be part of the story, no question about it, when we talk about Becerra's rise in the last few weeks of this race. And when we talk about heading to the general election, there's going to be plenty of stories about where are Latino voters heading as we head to...
But in California, isn't there particular politics there? You've had a black community there. Bass, Karen Bass represents that kind of candidate, the person who is establishment, black political figure. And then you've had a rising political Latino infrastructure that at times has felt as though they were pushed aside, and that they were pushed aside by Democrats.
No question, and I think Steyer tried to take advantage of that. I mean, we saw him deploy, for example, Carlos Manuel Espina, one of like the biggest Latino influencers in the country, on the campaign trail, and definitely tried to tailor and target part of his campaign toward Latino voters, recognizing obviously what a sizable population it is in California. But I think that at the end of the day, like, this race will end up being, when you look at the Democrats that ascended and how Becerra sort of benefited from Swalwell's fall and from the allegations and him having to pull out of the race, part of it is because of just the experience, the resume.
But what did Swalwell stand for? I mean, putting aside like the misconduct, right, because that's the issue that took him down, was it just name recognition, or was there a particular lane he occupied?
He was very loud in the anti-Trump space, online, on X, Twitter, like that's where he was. And, you know, not to dignify Jesse Waters too much here, but, you know, going back and just to fact check him, Becerra was the former state attorney general. He was a former member of Congress for a long time. Yeah, he was the HHS secretary. He had the single best government leadership resume. And so maybe it was kind of confounding that because of that, he wasn't better earlier in the race, and I think that surprised a lot.
Can I piggyback on that? One thing that Harry didn't show there in the numbers, scroll down a little bit more, Katie Porter.
Yeah.
Who
went in the
years
star.
Ago.
Yeah, yeah.
2 years ago.
Let me let you preach on this for a minute.
2 years ago.
Because all the progressives, you know, once they saw her PowerPoints, they were like, we're into this.
Exactly. The chalkboards or whatever. And then all of a sudden, one little video of her yelling at an assistant and some other things that came out around her. And to see 4.6%, I think it was, on that math. I mean, I'm not Harry Ente, I'm not the data guy, but I can be for that time. And it's incredible to see the meteoric rise of her and the fall of her, especially after Swalwell and what you mentioned,
so
him
now
dropping
you're
out.
saying that's 2 stars fallen.
Well, or take it to go the progressive route. If you look at Rahman in the L.A. Mayor's race, if you look at, you know, in Iowa in the Senate race, the more, you know, establishment guy won the Democratic primary there. You know, it was not a great night for that.
Yeah, I'm glad you're bringing it up. And we're going to talk about this more in the show, because there was going into the night a narrative of how will the progressive wing of the Democratic Party do? How will Trump endorsed candidates do? And we're starting to get a little bit of a picture of that. And a third thing I'm interested in is, how did vets do? There's a whole world of veterans who have entered politics, and I'm intrigued. But before we leave California, I want to talk about Steve Hilton. Earlier when we played that clip of him, what I found interesting is it wasn't just his name over and over behind him. Do you know what I mean?
Californiable?
Yeah, Californiable. It was like $3 gas, this with the housing, right? It really spoke to the issues of California. Is he close? Right? Are we looking at somebody who is truly competitive this fall?
Well, I think from a messaging standpoint, he's doing a great job. I mean, if you just look at the 3 things that you and I both looked at that very quickly.
Like it wasn't like these are Trump's policies and this is what I'm backing. It was like, I know you're thinking of X, Y, and Z.
The other thing with Hilton is, obviously being on TV gets you this polished sense of being able to talk to people in front of a camera. He's also worked for super PACs as well. So he has a little bit of that background. What you said earlier, Zach, about like the Spencer Pratt race, once we start to drill into policies, once we get to the general, we've got to figure out, how do you make California affordable? Because it is one of the biggest economies, right, on its own. I don't know how you make California affordable. We were talking off air about some industries that have left, production and things like that. How do you change that around? What's his plan for that? I don't know it.
Okay, I want to turn to another state where people are dealing with affordability issues, farm country, right? In Iowa, the primary season trend of President Trump's preferred candidate winning isn't so clear-cut yet. CNN projects that Trump-backed candidate Randy Feenstra will lose the GOP gubernatorial primary there to Zach Lane. And Lane is a farmer and a businessman who has never held office. So he did have the support from influencers with the so-called Make America Healthy Again movement. He campaigned, however, with an outsider message, calling out the Iowa Republican establishment.
I don't have to tell you this, but nobody thought this could be done. We were outspent, opposed by the establishment, told to wait our turn. Well, tonight the people of Iowa had something to say about that we're not going to wait anymore.
This was a fascinating race to me because, A, we were outspent. But I'm also not surprised that a farmer would have an outside voice in this election, given what they have been through with tariffs, with even, let's say, immigration labor concerns. Sabrina, have you been watching Iowa? What's interesting for you?
And I think what's interesting here to sort of to see the distinction, like going into last night, so much of the conversation has been like everyone that Trump endorses ultimately wins, and sort of we've seen it in race after race where he supported someone in a primary, they come out of it, he gets to say, look at how my endorsement helps. This is a case where, this is a rare case for him, but this is a case where that didn't play out. One of the things that interests...
Was it just because it was too little too late? I mean, he did it like just a few days ago.
I mean, he did it for Paxton in Texas as well, and gets to have the win and gets to have the, like, I endorsed the winner.
Okay.
So this one is like, he put his bet, like, he guessed or bet that he was going to win, the Feenstra was going to win, and ultimately it didn't play out that way. But I think that in this one, I think what I find really interesting is sort of that distinction between there was the Trump-endorsed candidate and there was the Maha-endorsed candidate. And there's been so much conflation of like Trump with Make America Healthy Again and how they supported him in 2024. And this sort of shows this coalition of voters and support that exists outside of Trump.
Yeah, I'm going to wonder where TPUSA put its money in those races as well, given some sort of slivers of that coalition that are extremely anti-war. And yeah,
well, I mean, in the war specifically, that is a policy that has affected farmers in Iowa.
Right.
The
Straight
diesel
from
prices,
yes.
Fertilizer prices, those are things that we keep seeing stories about, and they will filter down into the politics.
Can I turn to Democrats for a second? I've been fascinated at the spending being done by Vote Vet. They're a group that started back in 2006 in the anti-war time then. And they're sort of back with a vengeance now in this anti-forever wars moment. They spent $9.7 million on ads for Josh Turek, who is the Democrat, one of the Democrats who was running for Senate. And what do you think about their rise in this moment?
Well, I think back to Zach's overall point, the war is something that has unified a lot of different coalitions.
Yes.
Because Trump ran on no new wars, and then he started a war. Well, first it was a military operation, then it became a war. So you've got different factions not only within MAGA that are upset about that. You have people that are maybe libertarian or a little bit center-left that are upset about that. And the fact that this group has pumped in money around veterans saying, we don't take care of our veterans when they come back. B, we're putting them into another conflict. We've already lost 13 U.S. soldier lives. So I think there's a lot of ammunition to use on this, no pun intended.
I noticed in Montana, I think Alani Bankhead, another candidate who's running, she has a huge security background, again, running as kind of like, I'm a vet, I know the Pentagon, I know how this spending should be done, and I think it should be different. I want to play for you Josh Turek on Tuesday, kind of giving one of his messages. It'll give you a sense of how he had been talking on the campaign trail.
If you are tired of this rigged system only looking out for billionaires and leaving the rest of us behind, then join us. Whether you are a Republican, an independent, or a Democrat, there is room here for you in our campaign. Together, we can win this race.
Is this going to be competitive, Iowa?
I mean, if you talk to the handicappers, I don't think it's maybe the top level state for them. Democrats do need to win multiple states that Trump won by a lot in order to make the Senate competitive.
But they're trying. There's not places where people are like giving up on. It's a little bit like the Republicans spending in Texas. And you're like, should you need to spend this amount of money in Texas?
Yeah, and forcing the spending is part of the game too for the money people in the parties. So.
It's interesting that we're talking about Iowa, though, right? I mean, it's been like, if I look at my email inbox, I am consistently getting emails about these races in Iowa.
See,
and
I'm
Democrats.
not the only one then. Yeah, it's like,
and Democrats really pushing a point. And it is interesting because it is a state that Trump won by double digits. I mean, it is like considered reliably Republican state, and you kind of look at it as this place where I remember, going in the 2024 like Iowa caucuses and like trying to see like, okay, vibe check on like, is Trump going to move forward? Where are we at? And where are we at in the Republican Party today? So it's interesting to see it become a place that's being talked about as competitive. I think when you look at like what are the top 5 races, ultimately Iowa will not be one of them, but you can't discount it, and I think you have to
But again, it all depends on where we are with respect to issues, the war, etc. Come November.
You guys, next we're going to be talking about the votes that are still being counted in California this morning, and we will have the latest on the top races in the state. Later on CNN, after a reported sexting scandal, the Senate candidate Graham Plattner in Maine facing more backlash, this time from a fellow Democrat.